It was sunset. The sun was already setting towards the horizon. The carriage made its way through the winding roads leading to the ancient castle. Mabel was sitting inside the cabin, and her little son slept on her lap. The boy's blue eyes were closed. He was seeing sweet childhood dreams. The girl's heart was beating excitedly, because the outcome of this trip seemed useless to her. She knew that returning home was not only an excuse to visit her mother, it was also an opportunity to confront her past. Looking ahead through the dark windows of the carriage, the heroine asked the coachman to go faster. She was willing to pay him more for this trip. And he, clutching the reins in his hands, only nodded in response, as if feeling the heaviness in her heart. Arriving at the place, Mabel knocked on the castle door. The man who replaced the butler appeared before her. His gaze was restrained, but inside him the heroine caught a note of sympathy. He, surprised, let the girl inside. Walking through the corridors, Mabel entered the room where relatives had already gathered to spend the last hours of her life with her mother. There was a quiet tension all around. It was not easy for those present to accept future events. The heroine, despite her determination, felt that it was difficult to be here. She was frightened by a meeting with the past. The woman's face was tormented by illness, but when she saw her daughter, a light of joy lit up in her eyes. Mabel looked at her with love and sorrow, realizing that time could not be turned back. Her brother stood next to the bed. The guy's face expressed both surprise and accusation. The silent question of where his sister had been seemed to lie on his lips. The grandmother smiled, looking at the little boy. She saw her daughter reflected in him, and she unmistakably realized that it was her grandson. The woman whispered the words of motherly love to her daughter, like the last message before leaving for another world. And Mabel, peering into the faces of her loved ones, felt that this return was perhaps not as useless as she thought. Death came quietly and inevitably, shrouding the room in sorrow. The blonde squeezed her mother's hand, as if it could bring her back to life. She felt death approaching every second until it finally arrived. Tears flowed down the cheeks of the relatives. Mabel's brother's face expressed a mixture of grief and accusation. There was a strong pain inside her that now gave no rest. For everyone present, the woman's death was a loss, an irreparable emptiness. After saying goodbye to the deceased, everyone gathered for dinner. Relatives began asking Mabel where she had been all this time. Their surprise turned into a series of questions. It seemed that those around her saw in the heroine a ghost from the past. The girl was silent, feeling the pressure of their gazes. Every word was like a blow to her heart. Mabel expressed words of sympathy for her brother. She understood that his pain was no less than her own. The girl thought that it was time to leave as soon as possible, so as not to see or feel this torment anymore. But her brother stood in her way like a wall, not allowing her to leave. The deep night outside the window indicated that the path was unknown and dangerous. The guy suggested that his sister wait until the morning. He was worried about her and did not want her to disappear from their lives again. At a time when it was already deep night, a man suddenly burst into the house. His arrival was accompanied by noise and indignant cries of the servant, who tried to stop the uninvited guest. However, Duke Quintrell was restless. His will was only one goal: to get to Mabel. Seeing him, the girl was scared. The man's appearance awakened in her old fears and pains that she had tried in vain to forget. The Duke's eyes radiated determination and a certain secret joy. He was glad that he had finally found her, his future wife, his bride. However, Mabel's words dashed his hopes. Her phrase, "I am no longer your bride," sounded like a sentence to him. The Duke felt his heart squeezing in his chest, but he did not give up. His gaze reflected all the pain that he had experienced in the past years. He realized that he would not leave the girl so easily, and would not leave until he won her heart again. Mabel Robbins was the eldest and only daughter of the Marquis Robbie. 6 years ago, her engagement was the most discussed topic in the entire state, but she did not pay much attention to either the rumors or her future husband, Demore. He was the successor of an influential person in the state, Freeman. Her family was looking for a worthy husband for their daughter. The newlyweds had a future full of blessings and warm words of love. However, the girl realized that she did not have feelings for her groom, but wanted to spend her life next to her loved one. And everything that happened was a lie. So she came up with something. Soon an accident occurred, but the girl's body was never found. Everyone was looking for Mabel, but no one knew where she had gone. 3 years passed like this. According to the law of the kingdom, the missing person was declared dead, and the engagement of these two was broken off. The guest, the Duc de Moore, looked at Mabel with mixed feelings, excitement and curiosity, Doubt and bewilderment were inside the hero. The guy spoke in words that the girl heard but rejected in her mind. Peering into her eyes, he whispered that she had fooled everyone around her finger. The blonde, standing in front of the hero, felt how the past suddenly came to life in her memory. The groom recalled that the engagement was called off 2 years ago. Everyone thought that the Marquise's daughter had died in the accident, but it doesn't matter anymore. The Duke decided not to give up and to be persistent. He wanted to know why his beloved disappeared, and why she returned only now. Taking a step towards her, he decided to gently kiss her hair. Mabel stepped back, resisting his approach. There was no reason for her to let him touch her like that. After that, the lady's gaze switched to the boy. He stood behind her. The girl felt her heart clench with love and horror. The boy, Patrick, stood there, beaming with beauty and innocence. His hair was luxurious and light, like the rays of the sun. His blue eyes with emerald pupils seemed incredibly luminous. The Duke asked whose child it was and realized the truth. It was their common child. Tiny Patrick was a living testimony to their past love and separation. Mabel's brother intervened, standing up for his sister. He politely but persistently asked the groom to leave the room. The guy explained to the guest that his sister was tired and needed peace. The groom apologized for his intrusion and insisted on staying. He expressed his condolences over the woman's death and admitted his fears that his loved one would run away again. Mabel's brother, although he accepted with condolences, did not agree to the guest's lodging for the night. However, the Duke did not give up. Meanwhile, the girl inside was full of anxiety and fear. She didn't want the guest to stay. The heroine felt protected when the guy was not around. She saw him as a threat that could destroy her fragile heart. The Duke stopped, his gaze becoming determined. The groom decided not to let the girl run away again for fear of losing her. The guy's feelings were mixed. The fear of missing his beloved again and the joy that he had found her. After all, the search time was a living hell for him. Now he felt that if he and his beloved were together, they would be able to overcome any challenge. All that remained was to explain to the girl. Mabel went to her room and lay down on her bed. But sleep did not come to her. Doubts and fears raged in her soul. The fugitive felt that she was confused and did not know what to do next. She realized that if nothing changed, she could remain a prisoner of her past. She needs to find the strength to free herself. Scenes from 5 years ago surfaced in the girl's memories. Then the groom, whose face she tried to forget, tried to kill her. These memories enveloped Mabel's thoughts, haunting her even at night. The would-be bride understood that she now had a son, Patrick, and she has a responsibility to protect him, even if it means running away. She came to this castle with only one purpose, to see her mother. But now it was important to remember about your own and the child's safety. The girl agreed in advance with the coachman about the possible departure back if the situation required it. She decided to do so. Gradually, the first signs of dawn began to appear in the sky. The carriage with the fugitives suddenly turned around and began to go in the opposite direction. Mabel wondered why they didn't move on. However, the coachman announced that it was just the passenger's imagination. The heroine remembered the face of the guy she was so afraid of, and her heart sank with fear. She really didn't want to go back. The carriage that seemed to be leaving the estate suddenly returned. Mabel went out to find out the reason. The groom was waiting for her in the coachman's place. He insisted that he was not going to let his beloved go. The heroine was surprised. She did not see the real driver. But the guy explained that he was safe. The guy invited the fugitive to a conversation and took her aside. This conversation became a kind of exploration of their future relationship. Mabel was afraid to refuse, fearing that her interlocutor would forbid her to leave the estate. However, he loved her and could not allow such behavior. The ex-fiancé could not understand why the brunette behaved this way. After all, their engagement was broken off long ago. The guy asked if she still loved him. Mabel stood in front of him as if in a stupor. She didn't know what to answer. Doubts thundered in her soul and she felt weak. The heroine stated that she no longer feels anything for her interlocutor. Her voice sounded barely audible. The guy looked at her sadly, as if his heart had broken into pieces. He didn't believe her and didn't want to believe her. Such truth didn't suit him. Mabel's hands were shaking. Her heart was squeezing with pain and fear. She felt that something was still fluctuating inside, but she couldn't determine what exactly. The guy realized that she still had feelings, but she was afraid of something that she herself could not understand. Losing his beloved again for the Duke was the same as dying. The guy came closer to the girl, trying to squeeze her hand in his. He wanted to say words of love, but something stopped him. Both had mixed feelings. The guy's love and fear, Mabel's mistrust and fear. They stood there, separated by misunderstanding. Both felt the pain of losing love, which may never return. For the girl, meeting a guy seemed like a big mistake. But the guy assured her that he would never leave her. The heroine asked first to attend her mother's funeral, and later they could get together and discuss everything. The guy agreed. As they headed back to the mansion, the beauty of the dawn unfolded before them. Nature woke up, surrounding them with its grandeur. The mansion appeared before them in all its splendor. At that moment, the sun was already fully illuminating it. It was a beautiful morning. At the door of the house, the girl was met by her brother. He was glad that she returned, as he was worried about her. The sister expressed a desire to change clothes. It was necessary to wear a morning dress to be ready for the funeral. They postponed the conversation until later. The blonde invited the girl to stay with him so that they would have time to discuss everything. After all, they haven't seen each other for so long. In the cold morning air, the heroine and her brother were having a pleasant conversation. Feeling cool, they discussed past and future events. The interlocutors found solace in each other's warmth and support. The girl decided to wake up her son, remembering that she had left him alone. Reflecting during the conversation, it seemed to her that even death would be a blessing. For 5 years she lived in constant fear. I had to constantly hide from danger. When she returned to her son, she discovered that he was no longer in the carriage. He was being held in the arms of her fiancé. The heroine got scared when she realized that her son was left alone, so she ran to him. The guy took the child in his arms. The brunette thought that the child would be scared if he didn't see his mother nearby. The girl's brother was surprised why her sister left her son unattended. The returning fugitive took her son into her arms. She also expressed her desire for the funeral to take place with family. The ex-fiancé asked the Duke to leave, and he agreed. The hero realized that he would have to endure just one day without his beloved. The look of the boy saying goodbye to him remained in his memory. The boy looked at him in awe, as if he understood that it was his father. There was also love in that look. His beauty was amazing, blue eyes filled with purity and bright curls that fluttered in the wind. It was difficult for the father to restrain himself when he met his son's gaze. It was a look full of trust and love that pierced his heart. The guy waved his hand to the child as if promising to return. The hero was full of hope and determination after his conversation with the bride. The day of the funeral arrived. The estate was filled with quiet sobs and heavy sighs. People stood near the grave, surrounded by flowers. The grief was palpable in every look and every movement of those present. The girl watched this picture from the window. Her heart was heavy with sadness and helplessness. Sitting on the bed in her mother's room, she felt tears appearing on her face. Her son was sitting next to her. His presence was the only source of comfort. And images of my ex-groom popped up in my thoughts. The one who said he still loved her. She remembered how he held their son in his arms. It filled her heart with mixed feelings. Love, doubt, and fear. The son worriedly asked his mother what happened to her and why she was sad. Mabel smiled, assuring her that everything was fine. And then she hugged her son tightly. The joyful boy suggested going for a walk outside. The girl was worried that the boy's appearance might surprise the guests at the funeral. Therefore, she invited him to stay in the room. However, the son insisted on a walk in the fresh air. At this time, guests who had come to the funeral entered the house. It was her brother and Christina. The guy noticed that his sister might need help. He offered his support, and she agreed. The girl and Christina exchanged glances. At that moment, the room resounded with joy from their meeting. Then the girl's younger sister, Marie, entered the room. The sisters immediately hugged. The youngest of them asked where she had been all this time. In response, the older sister invited them to sit down and talk. The girl's brother, smiling at his nephew, offered him a carrot cake to eat. The eyes of everyone gathered focused on the boy, waiting for his answer. And the boy said that he doesn't like carrots. There was a sudden moment of tension in the room. This unexpected remark revealed the secret that the girl was trying to hide. Shades of anxiety and embarrassment flashed in her eyes. After all, the Duke was not a fan of carrots either. This coincidence could not be accidental. A beautiful sunset set in against the backdrop of the awkward situation. It painted the surrounding objects in warm shades and filled the room with pleasant light. The younger sister asked the girl how she spent all these years. The whole family was also interested in her health and financial situation. The girl said that she had a cold several times. She admitted that the only thing she was good at was sewing. She made a living by selling her clothes and lace. This greatly surprised the family. They were perplexed how she could take care of the child and work at the same time. The girl said that many people helped her. Christina decided to ask the girl if Patrick was really the son of the Duke. This question took the girl by surprise. The heroine felt confused. She had to agree with this. The blonde admitted that the boy will turn 4 this year. Relatives gathered around began asking the girl questions. For example, about her decision not to marry the Duke. Also about raising a child alone after leaving. Their surprise increased when they realized who the blue-eyed boy's father was. Christina's face expressed mixed feelings. Surprise, some concern, perhaps even bewilderment. The fugitive experienced complex emotions when she told the truth about her son. She felt embarrassed and a little sad about it. She didn't like that her personal life became the subject of discussion. Although it was a pity that the secret became known to everyone, the girl did not want to give any more explanations. Moreover, she said that she does not plan to marry the Duke. This statement caused great surprise, especially among her brother. The heroine explained that she prefers to raise her son in a calm and secluded place, without being married. In her mind, this decision was the best for everyone, and all because no one from outside the family will approach her son. The relatives were having a conversation at the table on which stood a candlestick. Its warm light softly illuminated the room, and next to him stood a lonely glass. The heroes continued to discuss past events. For example, they talked about how hard the Duke felt about the girl's absence when she disappeared. Mabel's brother didn't understand why she had to leave again without giving any explanation. This sister's decision was extremely incomprehensible to him. The girl explained that she was not going to leave right now. The younger sister expressed relief, saying that the main thing was that Mabel was alive and well. Relatives in the room expressed their worries about the girl's future departure. After all the time the heroine was absent, they missed her. The younger sister mentioned that their mother and brother especially missed the girl. The brother was amazed that the heroine was able to work while raising her son alone. He thought it was very difficult. The guy expressed a desire to help his sister. The girl was the eldest daughter of the family, and her brother could not let her go so easily again. At this time, a servant entered the room. He reported the news, which attracted the attention of everyone present. He announced that the Duc d'Amour had arrived. Now the guest wanted to talk to the girl's brother alone. Face to face, the guy had a question. Why should the conversation be with him and not with the girl? The guy, hearing this, thought that something serious had happened. He asked the servant to tell him that he would come down soon. The girl's brother approached the guest, ready to listen to him. The guy told the owner of the house about his love for his ex-fiancé. He said his memories and feelings were still strong. The brother agreed that it was possible. After all, they were also friends before. Despite the fact that many years have passed since the accident, the guy expressed sincere understanding of the hero's feelings. The groom understood that his presence could be unpleasant for the girl. And now it was also a day of grief and sorrow. It seemed to the guy that his support might be needed that day. But at the same time, he felt some awkwardness in front of the bride. He had mixed feelings. On the one hand, he wanted to be there, support her and help. On the other hand, he understood that her feelings for him probably would not remain the same. For the guest, the owner of the house was like a younger brother. He deeply valued their friendship. However, realizing that his ex-fiancé did not want to see him here, he felt disappointed at her rejection. The girl's brother saw her difficult emotional state. He expressed his support and understanding of his dear sister's feelings. He understood that it was a difficult day for the fugitive, and tried to be there to help her get through this moment. The guest decided to explain to the ex-fiancé's brother the true reason for their meeting. He stated his desire to renew his engagement to the girl. However, his brother rejected his offer. He believed that his sister should decide for herself who to be with. The hero decided not to interfere in the situation. The guest continued to insist on renewing his engagement to his ex-fiancé. His words sounded with extraordinary confidence. He expressed a sincere desire to take the next step. The guy seemed to have been thinking about legitimizing their relationship for a long time and seriously. Surprise instantly gripped the girl's brother. This sudden turn of events left him thinking about many questions. He understood that this was expected. The blonde remembered the efforts of the groom in finding the missing bride. But still, the guy seemed to be shackled by surprise. The brevity of the sister's acquaintance with the groom previously worried the hero. He felt that such a quick move might be too hasty. However, he previously supported the wedding. The brother believed that the relationship between the young people could be strengthened if they were given more time. He decided to agree to everything so that they could get to know each other better, and later build a strong, happy family. The groom continued to convince the bride's brother. It emphasized his sanity and prudence. He also expressed confidence that the owner of the house will support them in their decision to start a family, as unshakable as the groom himself. After all, the girl's future together with the brunette will certainly bring them good and happiness. He asked the guy to step into his position and support him. In addition, he reminded of the girl's child. The boy, in his opinion, deserved a full and happy family, and the hero considered himself his father. The brother, with bitterness in his voice, asked the guy for forgiveness. However, he was right. No one could force his sister to marry if she did not want it herself. However, the ex-fiancé insisted that the girl's feelings for him had not dried up. It was a reminder of the time they spent together, about how they recognized each other and believed that these experiences remained alive to this day. Moreover, he considered their feelings not one-sided. The brother did not want his sister to marry the Duke again. His opinion this time was as categorical as the girl's. In the past, he considered this marriage successful. Now the hero could not allow his sister to take this step again. The brother remembered how the groom made every effort to find his missing sister when she disappeared. He didn't stop even when she was declared dead. The guy continued to hope and look for his beloved. It showed how much he loved her, and his brother knew it well. But despite all this, he believed that the decision rested with the sister herself. Her brother did not want to interfere in her personal life. The groom insisted on understanding the reason for the refusal. The guy could only repeat that he had no right to decide for his sister. However, he also clarified why the Duke avoided a personal conversation with the girl. This conversation seemed difficult for the ex-fiancé. The guest seemed to understand the essence of his words and their significance. They needed to be carefully considered. Now, while there are no strangers, was the best time for this. The guest apologized for the disturbance at such a late hour. He also expressed his gratitude for the wonderful dinner. The Duke understood that the funeral had caused a lot of trouble for the owners, and wished them a good rest. The owner of the house also wished him good night. The guest left the house, passing along the corridor. Moonlight penetrated through the windows, filling the room with its light. The ex-fiancé had mixed feelings. It was both a disappointment and a relief from some of the clarity these conversations brought. Walking along the corridor, he met a girl. It looks like she didn't expect him to show up. She walked around thinking the guest was in the guest room, and the guy was just heading towards this place at that time. He decided to joke about how time had accidentally brought them together. But for the girl, it was just a coincidence. She was categorical in her attitude towards the groom, and did not want to have anything to do with him. The hero decided to find out why the girl suddenly said that, and why he refuses to explain the reason for his refusal. He felt that he should know the answer to this question. However, there was no answer. The girl's surprise at such a question was understandable. She believed that the Duke probably knew the answer to his question. The blonde did not want to continue the conversation and asked the guest to leave. The guy asked permission to look at his son before leaving. However, the boy was already asleep according to his mother. Suddenly, the girl heard footsteps. The kid went down the stairs, cheerfully greeting his uncle. The boy asked why his uncle was here. The guy replied that he just wanted to see him. Christina approached the stairs and began to observe the situation. Mabel approached her son to take him into her arms. She asked the boy why he was not in bed since it was already midnight. The child heard his mother's explanation that his uncle was about to leave. Therefore, the girl asked her son to return to the room. The father looked at the boy, following him with his eyes. The heroine, holding her son by the hand, led him back to the room. Christina walked down the stairs with a slight smile. When she saw the guest, her eyes sparkled with interest. She suggested having an important conversation. This unexpected turn of events left the guest feeling a little confused. But he agreed to the conversation with curiosity. With a smile on her face, Christina suggested continuing the conversation near the children's room. She explained that although Patrick is usually obedient, his mother may need help. The guest agreed with the hostess's statement. As they walked towards the children's room, Patrick's mother watched this conversation. There was something similar to anxiety and hope in her eyes. The girl's heart beat faster in anticipation of how the conversation would end, and also from thoughts about the future of my son. In the room, Patrick asked his mother who this uncle was. His mother looked at him with tenderness and love, afraid to give an answer. She replied that this was the Duke, the owner of the city. Patrick was interested, and his eyes lit up with joy when he talked about the uncle he liked. At the same time, his mother experienced mixed feelings of joy and anxiety. After all, these will be the boy's first memories of his father. As she walked her son to bed, the girl told him about the dragon. He, according to his mother, wandered around the palace at night and scared those who were not yet sleeping. The boy agreed to go to bed. His mother led him into the room and lay down next to him. The child asked his mother's opinion about their new friend. Her gaze was filled with mixed feelings. The heroine understood that the boy and the Duke were related. This meant that their relationship could become closer. However, she could not suppress the feeling of hatred towards the Duke for what happened in the past. The child quickly fell asleep. But sleep did not come to the girl for a long time. She pondered the words of her child. Fear seeped into her thoughts. She remembered that the Duke could become a source of pain and suffering. That's why she rejected his marriage proposal. After all, the Duke may have been the one who tried to kill her. Memories of the past suddenly took possession of the heroine. This happened 5 years ago when she went in a carriage to visit the Duke. The coachman was surprised at her haste because the road was coming to an end. The bride initially hid the truth from her new acquaintance. She said that she could not tell the coachman about this secret. But then she admitted that she was pregnant with the Duke's child. The girl was full of hope that the groom would be happy. The carriage suddenly stopped before reaching its destination. The heroine's new acquaintance came out to find out what was happening around. But at that moment, an arrow hit the coachman. She mortally wounded the guy. In a panic, not understanding what was happening, she heard the coachman screaming. She heard a voice begging her to run. The girl could not understand what was happening. She wondered why someone decided to kill her. Deciding to get out of the carriage, she saw a terrible sight. A man in a black cloak stood on the street with a sword in his hands. There were a lot of dead people around. The killer asked her to reconcile. He claimed that no one could help her. The heroine's heart beat with incredible force. Fear and bewilderment prevented her from understanding what was happening. She decided to find out why this man so mercilessly kills everyone in his path. The man in the black cloak calmly said that he was simply following orders. He is indifferent to the lives he takes. The girl decided to find out who sent him here to do such a terrible thing. For her, it was absolutely crazy and incomprehensible. She called for help again and again. The heroine also offered to pay him any price just to be saved, even many times more than the price for murder. Nothing else mattered except her desire to survive, especially given her pregnancy. The killer rejected her offer. He said that he should stop thinking about running away to that person. The girl looked at him with a questioning look. Her eyes were full of worry. The stranger continued talking, mentioning Demore. Milady's heart beat wildly at these words. The blonde realized that only her fiancé and family knew about the return. She tried to find the answer to the question of who could want her death, and who ordered her to be killed. The heroine sat deep in thought. Despite the confident pronunciation of the words, she did not believe the killer. Mabel felt that this was a blatant lie. She turned over the faces in her mind, trying to identify which of them could have a motive for such madness. The killer hinted that her fiancé might have known about her route. All ideas about his love for the heroine began to seem like a blatant lie. Her soul was torn between the desire to believe him and desperate hope. She winced when the killer mentioned her pregnancy. The situation became even grimmer. She felt her nerves stretched to the limit. After all, the killer has to make his choice. Decide to take her life now, or allow her to return to her groom so that the heroine will die in his arms. The stranger said that if the girl was ready for the second option, she should run away, as far as possible and as quickly as possible. The girl rushed forward, trying to get away from danger. After some time, she felt that safety had returned to her. No one else was chasing her. The heroine wondered about the questions swirling in her head. For example, how could this happen? The Duke promised to protect and love her, but for some reason everything turned out differently. She decided not to trust the stranger's words so easily. An unknown person claimed that the Duke had sent him. The blonde began to wonder why he needed this. He is the heir of a rich and illustrious family. At first glance, the guy had no reason to kill her. This situation left Mabel with many questions to which she did not know the answer. The sun's rays began to penetrate through the windows. The girl woke up and got out of bed. She felt tenderness in her heart, looking at her sleeping son. The heroine gently ran her hand through his hair, admiring his quiet sleep. Then she went out into the corridor and met Christina. The young mother greeted her with a smile. The girl greeted Christina in the corridor with a warm greeting. Her heart was filled with a pleasant feeling at the sight of a familiar face. The fugitive expressed a desire to find out where her brother was. Christina said that it was better for the girl to stay in the mansion. She assured that she would be safe here, and her family will always support her. The girl said grateful words to Christina. Then, walking along the corridor, she headed to her brother in the library. Having met him, she guessed about the upcoming conversation. The brother suggested postponing it for the evening, explaining that he had an important meeting. They agreed to discuss issues related to her decision to leave the mansion that evening. The girl expressed gratitude to her brother for his understanding, and also for your support. The guy realized that this decision was connected with her feelings for Patrick. The heroine said that she decided to stay. The brother greeted this news with surprise and joy in his eyes. He did not expect such a decision. It turns out Chris was right. The mansion was Mabel's safest refuge. After all, she understood that she did not know what the killer wanted. But the girl was sure that if the killer found out that she was alive, he might try to kill her again. Therefore, she understood the need for protection, even if you stay just a few days to avoid mortal danger. The brother was deeply relieved by what he heard. Before that, he thought that half his life would not be enough to convince his sister to stay. She sincerely apologized for the concern she had caused. But my brother had to go to a meeting so as not to be late. After all, the meeting is important and it will not be rescheduled if he is late. He went to the mansion. The magnificent palace was enveloped in an atmosphere of luxury and history. It seemed that its high walls were visible from all corners of the city. In the corner of the first room there was an armchair that looked extremely elegant. Graceful patterns completely filled all its wooden parts. Marquis Robbie attended the ongoing meeting, unable to stay away from what was happening. The girl's brother stood next to the Duke. The brunette thought about his bride, and how this blonde guy in a suit reminded her. Their presence did not go unnoticed by others. The Marquis wondered why everyone had gathered here near him and what they were doing. When meeting a new guest, the Duke greeted him with a smile. The guy, a little taken aback by the Duke's attention, greeted him. He reported that the child was doing well. At this time, the Queen entered the hall, and her appearance seemed to illuminate the room. Her long, wavy hair sparkled in the light of the chandeliers. Blonde strands framed her graceful face, emphasizing her aristocratic features. Her eyes were blue like the clear sky, sparkling, attracting the gaze of everyone present. They seemed to leave no one indifferent. A crown glittered on her head. She was decorated with precious stones, as if symbolizing her greatness and power. The Queen moved with effortless grace like the protagonist of a fairy tale. It was as if she was inviting everyone to enjoy her presence. Her gaze was full of grace and power. The beauty asked Robbie if he managed to rest in such a short time. The guy, with gratitude in his voice, assured her that he had time to rest. He was grateful for such concern from Her Majesty. It was decided to proceed with the meeting. Those present sat down at a heavy oak table. It was filled with documents and parchments. Behind him sat high-ranking members of the nobility and court councilors. Their faces were illuminated with concentration by the light of the candles. The Queen's birthday was approaching. This was a particularly important event, the first after her accession to the throne. Usually preparation for such a holiday was the job of the spouse. But due to the Queen's lack of a mate, this responsibility fell on the shoulders of others. And in this case, the choice fell on Duke Quinterel. It was his queen who personally chose to organize the holiday in honor of her. Wilhelmina Anjuel Freeman. That was the name of the beautiful queen. She received her title at 19 due to the death of the previous king. So there was only one heiress left in the royal family, the most noble girl. 4 years ago, she returned from long-term treatment in the principality. Then she attended a social party. The queen had noble features. She resembled portraits of great beauties. The girl stood out among others with her unique beauty. Her long blonde hair was like a stream of gold. They touched the shoulders, giving the beauty a majestic appearance. The queen's large, sparkling eyes were deep and mysterious. They attracted the attention of others, leaving no one indifferent. At this party, the queen fell in love with Duke de Mur at first sight. Even after the duke's refusal, the queen's feelings remained the same. When she heard about the disappearance of his fiancé, she thought that this was her chance to win her beloved. Soon the young marquise was declared dead. So, even as Freeman's queen, she continued to seek the duke's attention. But he didn't seem to notice the long-haired beauty at all. The duke was amazed at the ease with which the queen delegated the internal affairs of the palace to him. But her frankness made him wary. Worry about Marquise Robbie also remained a heavy burden. After all, he was afraid that the queen would find out about his bride and it would hurt her. Fear of failure forced the duke to abandon the preparations for the banquet. He suggested a more experienced candidate such as Duchess Arcana. Before, she organized holidays with extraordinary skill. It was noticeable that such an activity brought her only joy. The queen noticed that the duke was deeply concerned about the holiday. But finding an equally worthy person would not be easy. Therefore, she asked him to take charge of the organization, because it was a holiday in her honor. Suddenly, the duke's face became gloomy. The queen was amazed by this change. The guy explained that she deserved his devotion, but he was worried because of his lack of experience. The guy said that the beauty justifies her actions with loyalty. He was ready to celebrate, but was worried about his incompetence. However, this did not bother the queen at all. She wanted him to take charge of the holiday despite his inexperience. Those present understood that if the Duchess helped the guy, then everything would go fine. Preparations for the banquet could even be purely symbolic, but it could also be a true reflection of loyalty to the queen. The Duke still didn't want to do this. However, let's say completely different words. He expressed his consent, and this made the beauty very happy. Everyone present at the meeting looked at the guy in surprise. Next, someone present asked the queen a question. He wanted to know what she thought about marriage. This question came as a surprise to her. The queen had many enemies. Therefore, she should think about a successor. These words seemed very reasonable to the ruler. She decided to find out what the duke thought about this. The guy looked at the girl in surprise. His eyes widened in surprise. He had not expected such a question and for a moment lost his usual confidence. His gaze seemed frozen, trying to quickly come up with an answer. Fine wrinkles appeared on his forehead, indicating internal tension. He tried to find the right words to answer. Day Moore said he supported the lords. Over the course of this year, her position has gained sufficient stability, and the queen is admired by thousands of people. There are many worthy people from aristocratic families in the country. They are all loyal and kind. It was difficult for the duke to avoid the conversation. He invited the queen to help her choose an official candidate for the role of groom. The queen said that the heart is already occupied by a specific person. There was silence in the hall. Everyone wanted to know who she was talking about. The girl asked the duke why he didn't ask who it was. It was time for lunch and the meeting was over. The queen called the guy to come to her office. There was a massive wooden table in the office. Opposite the table stood a high chair with soft cushions, decorated with gold patterns. There were 2 exquisite porcelain cups on the table. The aromatic tea in them emitted a pleasant aroma, filling the room with warmth and peace. The queen began to say that she refused to get married for 4 years. The duke knew about this and felt sorry for the heroine. The beauty said that she didn't need an apology. Better, something more substantial. She didn't know how many confessions and refusals the guy received, but he was not ready to change his answer. The hero loved only his bride. The rejected girl looked at her beloved with surprise. Her usually firm and expressive gaze was shrouded in bewilderment. She asked why the duke could not forget the dead man. Her hands tensed and began to nervously fiddle with her dress. After all, 5 years have passed since his fiancé died in a road accident. The beauty had no more time to wait. After all this time she endured for his sake. She invited the duke to marry her, but the guy said that his bride was still alive. This surprised the queen extraordinarily. The guy said that his beloved recently returned home safe and sound. Deep surprise enveloped the queen's face. Her eyebrows rose and her eyes widened, as if trying to understand the unexpected turn in the conversation. The queen's cup of tea fell out of her hands. The girl stood and looked at the duke. She asked him what he meant. He apologized if he had suddenly frightened the queen and began to wipe off his tea-stained dress. The guy seemed to do it so tenderly and caringly. The queen asked if his bride was really still alive. After all, it would be incredible. The duke said that he saw her with his own eyes. When the girl's mother died, he went to her family's home and saw her there. The queen wondered why the duke rejected her proposal. Rejected simply because the ex-fiancé returned. But the guy said that he promised to be with the girl until the end of his days. The queen's gaze suddenly became upset. Surprise flashed in her eyes and her expression became sadder and more focused. She couldn't believe what she heard. The question of why this happened right now haunted her. The queen did not want the girl to die. But the beauty also could not understand why her rival had returned now. It would be better if she returned when they were already married. The queen apologized to the duke. She said that if it wasn't the duke next to her, then there would be no one else next to her. But the guy is trying to reason with her. He reminded his interlocutor that there are many men in the world who are much better than himself. If she tries to open her eyes, she will see them. These words aroused the queen's anger. She did not want to see anyone else near her except the Duke. The ruler asked him to leave his past relationship in the past because it would be better. Otherwise, she may issue an imperial decree, and it obliges the hero to marry her. She asked the Duke if he wanted her to die because of him. The Duke demonstrated his determination and persistence when he rejected the girl's proposal. It was clear in his gaze that he did not hesitate in his decision, and his words sounded firm and confident. The guy understood that the queen could get whatever she wanted. This irritated him incredibly, but the hero saw no other way out. Therefore, I had to tell about one more reason why he could not accept the offer. The queen asked what the reason was. The brunette said that he already has a child. The queen was even more surprised by this news. She couldn't believe how this became possible. After all, he's not even married. Therefore, the child could only be from his ex-fiancé. The queen believed that such things could not be taken at their word. 5 years have passed since Mabel disappeared. Therefore, the child cannot be immediately recognized as one's own. But the guy said that there is evidence of this. A child has traits that only appear in his family tree. The frustration on the queen's face was reflected in her eyes. A deep melancholy seeped through her mask of arrogance, revealing her true emotions. The first tear flowed down the queen's cheek. Her crying sounded pain and disappointment. It seemed as if her unspoken hopes were crumbling before her eyes. The Duke felt a heaviness in his chest as he watched her suffer. Guilt consumed him, reminding him of the decision that had shattered her world. The guy said that the child, moreover, was very similar to him, and since the hero became a dad, he cannot be near the queen. A marriage with him will negatively affect the kingdom and the reputation of the queen. But the rejected girl did not agree with this. She said that neither the first nor the second reasons are important to her. But the guy reminded that this was contrary to imperial laws. The queen's anger flared up like a fire burning in her heart. Her eyes sparkled with rage, and the words sounded like thunder breaking the silence. She needed this guy, and everything else was not important. For this, the girl was ready to do whatever it took, and even more. The Duke was silent. His eyes were full of deep thought. There was something mysterious in the silence which seemed to foreshadow an approaching storm. But then he realized that the queen might want to harm the girl. If this happens, then she better give up right away. The interlocutor took these words as a threat. But the guy said that this was not a threat, because he was her subordinate and could not talk to her so impudently. However, if this happened, he would never forgive anyone who would harm his family, even if it's the queen herself. The guy resolutely asked not to test his devotion to his family. Otherwise, his actions may be unexpected and decisive. After the conversation, the queen felt that she had lost control of herself. Fear of the future took over her. Her heart was full of grief and sadness. The queen said that despite the words of the interlocutor, this kingdom would be his. This is her will. So she advised the guy to give up. After the conversation, the Duke felt a heaviness in his heart and deep regret. He knew his decision had hurt the queen. The hero felt guilty. His soul was illuminated with anxiety, but not with doubts about his actions. The queen felt anger and resentment. Her heart was full of disappointment. She felt that her trust had been violated. Deep sadness and anxiety about the future took over her thoughts, and she felt the bitterness of loss and disappointment. The queen ordered her maid Christina to call Marcus Robbie to her, and do it as soon as possible. The following events take place at Mabel's house. Her sister came to visit her. She brought a lot of toys and other things for Patrick and his mother. She also brought a beautiful teddy bear, which the boy immediately liked. This bear was quite cute, and she brought a music box to her older sister Marie. The child was very happy with the new gift. The girl also brought her nephew several books with fairy tales because she thought he liked to read. The girl tried to be a good aunt. Mabel was grateful to her for this. The heroine played with her nephew for several hours. She really enjoyed spending time with the baby. The child seemed quite cute to the girl, because he looked like her sister. His mother confirmed their similarity. Children usually inherit the traits of their parents. This meant that the child also had his father's traits. As children grow older, their faces usually change, and it is true. So over time the boy may change in appearance. The younger sister raised her eyes. An expression of bewilderment and curiosity flashed through them. Her eyebrows raised slightly, and her gaze became more attentive and penetrating. Marie asked her sister if she was going to continue meeting with the Duke, but the girl replied that she was not like that. Therefore, there is no need to worry. The girl was very happy with the answer because she did not want her sister to move away from her again. Over the past 5 years of life without her older sister, It was very difficult for the heroine. The young mother expressed sympathy for her sister. Mabel was also grateful for the nice words addressed to her. The girl asked her son if he liked the toys he received. The child replied that he was very happy with such a gift. He called his aunt the best. The boy asked his mother to join the game. She agreed. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. The girl needed to meet a guest, so she was distracted from playing with her son. The heroine thought that it was Christina who had come. The moment she opened the door, her face showed mixed feelings of surprise and fear. Her gaze was frozen, as if she was dumbfounded and did not know how to react. Her ex-fiancé stood near the door. Suddenly, he began to hug her with all his might. The girl couldn't even imagine that he would do this. She was afraid that the old feeling would flare up in her again. That's why I asked him to let him go. The Duke was glad that the girl did not leave, as she had promised. However, the guy was worried and wondered what would happen if she did leave. He was afraid that she would disappear again without saying a word, just like last time. He wrapped his arms around her so warmly and confidently. There was a sincerity and tenderness in his embrace that spread around them. The hero repeated again that he was very afraid of losing the girl. But she replied that she had not left anywhere and was not going to leave. The brunette said that after the meeting he wanted to see the Marquis, but he was informed that he had returned to the Imperial Palace. The girl thought that her brother would return before everyone else, but Christina, who recently entered the room, said that Her Majesty had called him. Neither Christina nor the Duke knew the reason for this. The guy asked the girl not to leave just like that. After all, he has important news for her, so he asked his beloved to listen to him. This question is also related to Patrick. Mabel looked at the hero with a wary look. There was a child nearby, and he heard what was being said. The child's questioning gaze was full of curiosity and some wariness. His blue eyes opened wide, as if he was trying to unravel the mystery that lay before him. The parents decided to continue the conversation elsewhere. For example, with a cup of aromatic warm tea. The guy said that he was forced to tell the queen about Patrick and Mabel. The girl could not understand why this was needed, but the hero only expressed regrets. He was sorry that he had told the queen this news without first consulting the girl herself. Mabel was very upset by this. She did not want to spread the news of her return. But in the end, it became known. Duke said he had to admit he knew about heroin, and all because Her Majesty wants to marry him. The girl was very surprised. This was a big surprise for her. She wanted to know what answer the guy gave. The blonde hoped that he refused her, and it was true. Now she was trying to find an answer to why he did this. But there was nothing unusual in his refusal. Anyone could guess the reason. Everyone knows that his heart belongs only to Mabel. Of course, the heroine was pleased to hear this. She was flattered that the hero refused such a beauty because of her. But the guy continued talking. He explained that if it weren't for that conversation, others would still have found out about the girl. However, she wanted to leave before that happened. The guy could not understand how the young mother was going to live the rest of her life. After all, she doesn't have to hide anymore. Thus, she can ruin Patrick's childhood. Besides, the child needs a father. The brunette decided to find out if the girl was planning to run away abroad. But these were precisely the thoughts that came to her. There was a sudden awkward silence in the room. Like a thick veil, it surrounded those present. The silence was so thick that you could feel its pressure on your shoulders. The heroes did not dare to break the silence for some time. Since Mabel loved her child, the hero did not need to worry about him. There was something exciting and tense in the movements of her hands. Every gesture expressed internal struggle and uncertainty. The blonde was angry that the guy kept talking about what would be best. Her son initially thought that he had no father, and he was no stranger to it. Although in fact there are no children in this world who would think so. The guy understood that his son was just pretending. He is apparently afraid to ask his mother such questions. After all, his eyes shone with childish joy, curiosity about the world, and fear of upsetting anyone. The girl was clearly annoyed by these words. Her eyebrows knitted into an angry frown. An involuntary sigh escaped her lips. The father sitting next to him made a silent, dissatisfied expression. There was clear displeasure on his face. He was clearly annoyed. The guy grabbed the girl in his arms with such force, as if he was afraid of losing her forever. He held her close, trying to convey all his love through this gesture. In the midst of this embrace, he asked his beloved to marry him. The girl's heart beat with such force as if it was about to explode. The guy held her so tightly that she could not escape. The strength of the hug showed how strong the guy's feelings were, and the fact that he really is not ready to lose her again. He whispered words of love and marriage proposals into her ear again and again. The Duke could not understand why she chose the path of struggle rather than the easier path. The girl found it was a dream. It all feels like memories. Mabel believed that the guy was afraid to reveal his true intentions. That's why he decided to distract her. But the fear of losing his beloved made the guy's heart beat like crazy. Opening her eyes, Mabel asked to let her go. But the brunette continued to hold her. The heroine said that the title of husband of the Empress would suit him very well. Besides, this beauty loves him very much. Therefore, there is no need to upset Her Majesty. It is impossible not to take advantage of this opportunity. However, this title had no meaning for the hero. After these words, the Duke released the girl. He could not understand how his beloved could talk about another woman who liked him so easily. Mabel said that she did not believe in the sincerity of his love. She had already told this guy before. The girl asked me to believe this. In addition, the blonde said that she never loved her fiancé. She tried to say this so that he would believe her. After this, the heroine asked the guest to leave. She didn't even ask, she insisted. Before leaving, the Duke said that there was one thing that was important to remember. Even though their feelings are not mutual, he will still love only her. The girl stood in the middle of the room, absorbed in her thoughts. Her gaze was directed in the direction where her fiancé had just stood. There was hope in his eyes that he would turn around and come back to her. As the guy started to leave, Marquis Robbie returned. The owner invited the guy to go into his office for a conversation. The heroes felt very tense. The Duke decided to find out what the guy was talking about with the ruler. The blonde said that she forbade him to accept a marriage proposal for his sister from the Duke. The guest was interested in what answer his friend gave. The owner continued to explain. Despite the Empress's young age, the blood of the Emperor flows in her veins, and he doesn't want anyone to hold a grudge against him, or that his family would be harmed. He has no choice. In addition, it is important to take care of other family members. Therefore, the blonde invited the guy to accept the proposal of the young beauty. That would be a good title for him. The guest realized that the brother and sister shared the same thought. The girl has already said that she does not want to get married, and the Empress's order applies not only to the guy. Next, the Marquis spoke in more detail about the conversation with the Queen. The beauty said that his sister became a real hindrance for her. She didn't want to hear or know anything about the relationship between Mabel and the Duke. The ruler simply wanted to marry her beloved. If the guy helps dissuade his sister, he will be generously rewarded. The Queen was ready to give him everything he wanted. For example, marry into a famous family. The Queen could also write a matchmaking letter for the guy to become a royal concubine in a foreign country. And she could offer an increase in rank, for example, to the title of Duke. Then their conversation turned to the boy, Patrick. If Demur wants his son to live with him, whoever the Queen can adopt him, but only if he himself wants it. However, Brunet said that there was nothing he could not agree to become the Queen's husband. And even if Mabel chooses not him, the decision will remain the same. He was ready to be alone all his life until he died. After all, he only loves one girl. And because of the Queen, he is not going to change his decision. There is no need to worry about Mabel's safety. The hero said that you will always protect her. Next, he asked Robbie for a favor. He asked to convince the girl to agree with his proposal. This was the end of the conversation. The guest left the estate and got into the carriage. The blonde pondered their conversation. It seemed ridiculous and impossible for him to change his sister's opinion. He did not see any specific way to accomplish this. After all, the heroes of the current situation have very high standards. Nobody wants to give in to each other. Mabel called her brother when she saw that the guest had left. The heroes went to the library. The brother said that he had heard about his sister's previous meeting with the Duke. The girl confirmed this. The guy wanted to know what that conversation was about. She also said that the conversation was about a marriage proposal. Mabel also knew that her older brother was at a meeting with the Queen. The guy said that he rejected the Empress's offer. But if his sister agreed, she would be generously rewarded. The heroine stood frozen in indecision. There was confusion on her face, as if she was lost in a maze of her thoughts. If the Empress hated the girl, then the Queen could harm their entire family. The heroine was very afraid of the ruler's revenge, so she decided she wouldn't change her mind. The girl firmly decided not to marry the Duke. The brother decided to clarify why this decision was made. After all, it seemed to him that his sister still loved this man. This thought haunted the guy, so he asked his sister a direct question. The brother wanted to know if the girl loved this man, but she herself didn't know the answer. The girl kept wondering whether she should hate him or love him. After all, he is the father of her child, and the heroine loves the baby very much. Therefore, feelings for the Duke are no higher than feelings for one's own son. Despite the marriage proposal, the brother decided to clarify whether hatred of the guy had anything to do with the reason why she planned to leave. He wanted to know what that brunette did to her, but the heroine didn't want to talk about it now. She still planned to live with her brother for a while. Peace and safety for your son. The girl hoped that her fiancé would give up. The blonde said he would hope so too, so he asked his sister not to worry too much about what happened. Her Majesty is not one of those people who uses power to solve personal problems. In addition, the Duke promised to look after his beloved. The brother said that the guy promised to protect her no matter what. Mabel was very pleased to hear these words. She suggested that her brother rest, since he had recently returned from a meeting. The girl apologized for the fact that she was probably causing trouble, but for her brother it was nothing. After all, they are one family. The guy suggested leaving formalities in the conversation. His gaze slides from one point to another, expressing inner unrest. He couldn't figure out what to do. The guy might have acted calm before, but he didn't know how to act in the long run. And they say that time heals. A month has passed since those events. The day came when Freeman's men performed a dance of blessing. The capital was filled with cheerful people singing loudly. It was Empress Angel's birthday. The party was simply amazing. There were excellent and comprehensively organized events. It was even strange that the Duke organized all this. This is exactly the level of organization expected from a holiday in honor of Her Majesty. The scale of the event was impressive. Some guests began to think that the guy wanted to become the Empress's husband. If so, it will surely happen soon. Otherwise, why throw such a loud party? The guy always looked incredibly handsome. The Duke was the epitome of exquisite beauty. His features were framed by thick black eyelashes. The black hair was as shiny as silk, and gave the look a unique elegance. The hero's smile was like a ray of sunshine. The girls in the crowd dreamed of just talking to the Duke, and someone tried to find words to invite him to dance. The Queen entered the hall. In the crowd, she saw her beloved. Since he had already come to the holiday, he should have stayed close to the Empress. The guy apologized for not greeting the beauty earlier. He congratulated her on the holiday. The girl in love was pleased to hear such words. The Queen invited him to dance together to discuss one issue. But the guy didn't see the need for this. He suggested discussing the issue without dancing. The heroine clarified that this conversation should remain secret. The Duke decided to explain himself to the girl. He said he wasn't feeling well today. Therefore, he will not be able to dance. The Queen could not take the refusal personally and decided to act. The guy realized that she had conceived a cunning plan and was going to carry it out. The Empress walked through the hall with graceful grace and a commanding gaze, as if she carried deep mysteries and secrets within herself, not seeing any obstacles on the way to her goal. The Duke did not look happy. His gaze was filled with restrained discontent. The guy realized that he would not like the Queen's plan. The hall was filled with guests. Their numerous conversations created a constant background of noise. He filled the room with liveliness and energy. The Queen walked up the stairs to the stage with grace and majesty. Her gaze and posture convey confidence and determination. They emphasized her status as a leader. There was elegance and sophistication in her gait, as if every step was thought out and honed to perfection. Her outfit and jewelry shone against the lively crowd, and the exit attracted the attention of everyone present at the event. Taking the stage, the Queen thanked everyone for coming to her birthday. On this special day, the beauty had only one wish. She decided to voice it on stage. The Empress asked the Duke to come up to her in front of everyone. "Get up and come closer." The guy had no choice but to obey, even though he was uncomfortable. Every step expressed hostility towards the girl. Come on stage, he stood next to her. Next, the Queen invited him to become the prince of this kingdom in front of everyone. The Empress has made a public proposal and it cannot be refused. It was an order given on behalf of the Queen. The girl looked at her beloved with hope, but he was not ready to accept this offer. The guy looked at the beauty with a cold, angry gaze, like this. This was not the first time Her Majesty asked to marry her, but everything was in private. This is the first time she has voiced her wish in public. Quite a bold decision, considering that the guy is just a servant. The girl thought that he would not be able to refuse a public proposal, but this is an abuse of the loyalty of subordinates. This act incredibly angered the guy. Plucking up courage, he decided to act. The Duke turned to the ruler and expressed his condolences to her. The hero also explained that he was unable to obey the order. The girl in love looked in bewilderment. She couldn't believe that the Duke behaved like that. But the guy continued and explained the reason. In front of those present, he was not afraid to say that he had a child. There was commotion in the hall. The Queen did not expect him to tell the truth. Just like that in front of everyone. As if it wasn't enough for him to simply refuse. So he also dared to look at the girl so coldly and emotionlessly. Unable to bear it, the beauty grabbed him by the jacket as if threatening him. She said he shouldn't have treated her with such disdain. But the guy repeated that he could not agree. After all, he already has a child from another girl. For this reason, he cannot stand next to Her Majesty. Otherwise, it will be a deception of the royal family. And disrespect for the Queen herself. Having bowed to the Queen in front of witnesses, he asked to cancel the order. Then he simply left. Without expressing any warm emotions towards the Queen, he simply walked down the stairs. The girl stood rejected and offended in front of everyone. She saw how those around her began to whisper among themselves. People in the hall could not understand what was happening. Someone thought they heard the words wrong on stage. Others said it simply couldn't happen. The Duke cannot have an illegitimate child. Still others began to speculate who the girl could be. The day was approaching evening. The Duke was already approaching the carriage. But suddenly his beloved's brother called out to him. The Marquis did not know what had happened, so he asked his friend about it. The guy replied that it was the end. He didn't expect Her Majesty to do something like this. The blonde understood the hero's confusion, but he didn't expect that he would tell everyone about Patrick's existence. After all, after this everyone can start blaming the Duke. The brunette was surprised that his friend was so worried, but he only conveyed Mabel's words. The Duke began to wonder what this could mean. Is the girl really worried about him? His friend said that if he were his sister, he would also not want his son's presence to cause him any inconvenience. The guy replied that this was impossible. The son will never be, no matter what happens. The Duke was in a very bad mood that day, but thanks to the Marquis, he felt much better. Although Robbie didn't understand it. The brunette said goodbye to his friend. He was supposed to start a business trip tomorrow. The Duke told a friend that his family was in an unenviable position, but he asked them not to worry. He planned to put an end to this situation soon. The guy's friend decided to ask what he was going to do, but the Duke left the question unanswered. He just looked with a silent gaze. Entering the carriage, he said that in 5 days he would tell about this at their estate. These words greatly intrigued the brother of his beloved. He had no choice but to agree to these conditions. The Duke entered the carriage and it drove off, and the Marquis looked after him. He began to wonder what his friend was going to do. And what outcome could the situation have given today's events? Mabel was at home at the time. She sat in a room shrouded in the warm, dim light of the table lamps, creating a cozy atmosphere. Light curtains that let in light gave the room a cozy feel. There are pictures on the wall, and velvet wallpaper emphasized nobility. A fireplace burns in the corner, casting a soft, warm glow. The mother was sitting in a chair, waiting for her son. There was a smile on her face and hope in her heart. Suddenly the door swung open and the little son ran into the room with joy on his face. He immediately rushed to his mother's tender embrace. Their gazes met. This moment filled the room with warmth and love, as if nothing else existed besides the two of them. Mabel asked if her son had finished washing. The boy agreed and said that he was trying to behave well. The girl tenderly continued to hug her child and kiss him. She offered to dry his hair. The boy began to ask why he didn't see anyone else in the house except them. He couldn't figure out where everyone had gone. His mother replied that everyone had gone to a party. The child naively began to ask what the party meant and what people did at it. The girl explained that at such events she enjoys eating drinks, and from communicating with many people. The boy began to ask if his peers attended parties. He was bored and also wanted to attend such an event, but his mother could not understand why her son would do this. The boy looked at her with innocent eyes and said that he also wanted to chat with friends. It was quite unexpected to hear this from him. Mabel asked if it was really difficult for her son to live in this house. Isn't he having fun playing with his mom? Of course, it was a fun activity for a child. After all, there are a lot of toys and books around. But the kid missed meeting his friends. This confession made his mother a little sad. So she promised to take him to such an event when he was older. Apparently, living in hiding without being able to leave the mansion was a bad idea. Therefore, it is better to leave here as soon as possible. These thoughts haunted the girl. She hugged her son with love and care, trying to convey all her tenderness to him. The boy asked his mother how handsome he was. Can its beauty be compared, for example, with the beauty of heaven or earth? The child loved to fantasize and looked at the world around him with curiosity. He wondered if he could be compared with his father's beauty. These words struck the girl. He had never mentioned it before. The boy understood that after all he must have a father, even if he's never heard of it. The girl had really never told the child about her father before. The Duke's words came to the blonde's mind that the child understood everything. Apparently, this time the guy was right. The awkward silence of the heroine was interrupted by a maid who entered the room. She reported that the owner and the rest of the residents had returned. The girl, taking her son by the hand, went to meet the arrivals. She was surprised why the party ended so early. After all, it was a little after 8 in the evening. The thought of someone's illness flashed through her head. But Christina continued the conversation. She reported that the atmosphere at the banquet was not very good. The girl decided to find out what happened at the banquet. The heroine's younger sister began to explain. It was about Her Majesty. Mabel was a little scared because she remembered the conversation with the Duke about the Queen. She thought that the beauty really did as she promised. A frown showed the girl's anxiety. Christina continued to explain that she also did not imagine this outcome. Surely the ruler was ashamed to be in such a situation. These words calmed Mabel a little. The girl thought that the Duke deliberately rejected the ruler's proposal. He first approached the Queen and then refused her. If he wanted to get an advantage in that marriage, then it was worth shaking up his relationship with her. But the heroine was haunted by the thought that, in the end, the guy would marry the Queen. She held her son's hand tightly, betraying her concern. After all, she was afraid that by refusing public courtship he would reveal Patrick's existence. Because of this, it will be difficult to leave secretly. Upon returning from an important trip, the Duke of Mers also had a difficult conversation at home. His sister was waiting for him. Her name was Margarita de Quintrell. She greeted her brother with words about his madness, but the guy pretended that he didn't understand what he was talking about. The girl decided to tell what people are saying about him now. For example, that he has 10 mistresses, but now there are probably 20 of them. And the mother of an illegitimate child was the daughter of traitors. At the meeting, she was asked questions about baptism. This made her very angry. She heard these words personally, and the girl couldn't even imagine what rumors were circulating behind her back. Not only did the guy refuse the public courtship of the Queen, the most powerful person in the empire, but also for this reason, because of an illegitimate child. This became sensational gossip. For the guy, this was expected. He didn't see anything surprising in this. The Duke didn't care what was said behind his back, but talking about 20 mistresses was already too much for him. However, his sister was not in the mood for jokes. She was worried that her brother would marry this lady with a child. Margarita understood that her brother felt responsible for the child. She also knew about his feelings for this girl, but the lady said that she did not want to become his wife. The sister suggested that his brother not stick with people who don't like him. No matter how hard he tries, he still won't be able to charm her. These words hurt the guy very much. Not wanting to continue the conversation, he decided to leave the mansion. And all because the Duke was going to visit the Marquis family. Arriving at them, the guy sat down at a table on the veranda. There was a lot of greenery and flowers around. His posture expressed calm and dignity. He held a cup of tea in his hand, enjoying the aroma and warmth of the drink. The beautiful cup was a work of art. Its exquisite design is eye-catching. Every line and pattern was executed with special attention to detail. The Duke looked into the distance, as if he was deep in thought or enjoying the landscape in front of him. The guy sat at the table with an air of confidence and expectation. Everything about him spoke of inner determination. The girl slowly approaches him, and the Duke greeted her with his gaze. Demore called his beloved to come to him. The girl greeted him. They haven't seen each other for a long time. Therefore, the blonde was nervous and unconsciously looked at the hero. She came closer to him and sat down at the table. Her portion of tea was already ready. In an uncertain voice, Mabel said the word "why." The brunette expected that she would have many more questions. The girl wanted to know why he refused Her Majesty's courtship. There must be a very good reason for this, and she wanted to know her. The guy asked what the interlocutor meant. After all he wants is to marry his beloved. And the reason is not only the responsibility for Patrick, although the son is undoubtedly dear to the hero, but the girl he loved was much more important to him. He continued to look at her with loving eyes. The girl said that the Duke did not understand her feelings at all. Her voice was sad, but the guy did not agree with this. With a smile on his face, he said that he would do everything in his power to convince the girl of his love. Mabel didn't know why he was doing this. The hero further explained that if the parents are not married, the parent with a higher status should have custody of the child. These words caused horror in the girl's eyes. She realized that the Duke could take her son away from her anytime he wanted, and the guy made his interlocutor understand the seriousness of his intentions. Out of surprise, the girl decided to find out if he was really planning this. But that's not what the hero meant. He believed that a child was not a thing. Separation from his mother at this age will have a detrimental effect on his emotions. The Duke wanted his beloved girl and son to come live with him, but this proposal required careful thought. The heroine did not know what to do. Sitting on the veranda, she had many questions about the future. The girl went through the options that she considered appropriate in this situation. The guy admitted that he acted wrongly towards the bride, and because of this, she could be cruel to him. However, he wanted to know what kind of action she considered unacceptable. The hero couldn't even guess what was wrong. He wanted his bride to tell him this, but she only looked at the groom with a sad look. The Duke realized that she did not want to talk about it, so he decided not to force her. But he asked to be given a chance. The girl's eyes shone at that moment. She was pleased that the Duke still took care of her, and that he doesn't put pressure on her. However, the guy asked to give him only 1 year. The hero asked to trust him with only 1 year of her life, so that during this time she becomes the Duchess of Quintrell. If the girl continued to hate him after that, he promised to let her go, both her and her child. The heroine couldn't believe it. This proposal seemed impossible. She was afraid of being deceived. Therefore, I decided to refuse at first. The guy offered to draw up a receipt to win the girl over. He proposed to completely transfer custody of the child to the girl, and after his death, Patrick will inherit the duchy. And after they divorce, Mabel is free to remarry. However, the brunette assured the girl that even if they divorce, there will be no other woman in his life. He decided to swear to it. Perhaps this would be a good choice for a girl. Close your eyes to everything and live together for just 1 year. But the heroine could not understand why the guy did not understand what he had done wrong. Is it really? And why is he asking for a chance to atone? The girl's imagination began to paint a picture of an accident in the mansion. She thought that the Duke would quite possibly try to kill her at home. But why then make a receipt is not clear. Many questions arose in the heroine's head. She tried to compare the events of the past with what she knows now. But nothing worked out for her. It was hard for the girl to understand what the guy was thinking. But still, she promised to think about his proposal. The girl asked the Duke to return as soon as possible, because it was time for her to go too. The groom asked how long it would take the girl to give him an answer. The blonde agreed to voice her decision next week. It's not that long, the guy thought. If time is needed, it must be provided. Hugging his beloved goodbye, he said that he would look forward to their next meeting. His eyes seemed to glow with joy and happiness. Did he really ensure that he was at least given a chance? This is already better than it was before. The guy was happy about the warming in his relationship with his beloved. After some time, the queen summoned the heroine. The girl did not expect Her Majesty's call. They had never met before. But still, Mabel decided not to refuse and come to the meeting. The queen was looking forward to her. When they met, they greeted each other politely. An important conversation began in the royal chambers. The ruler congratulated the guest. Her return home was safe. The girl thanked her new friend for this. The empress further said that she had heard about the girl's child. She wanted to find out who his father is. Mabel honestly admitted and named the man. The queen said a proposal had been made to His Majesty for the celebration, but he rejected it, despite the many spectators. His excuse was that the child had already been born by his interlocutor. The empress further said that she had asked the girl's brother for a favor in advance. She was patient, trusting in his honesty. But the situation has changed. The girl in love decided to find out whether Mabel would marry the Duke. But the heroine reassured the princess by saying that she was not looking for marriage with a guy. However, if she does not agree, she may lose custody of her child. The ruler realized that the Duke was threatening her interlocutor, so she could give up and agree to this. The empress began to quickly go through options in her head on how she could emerge victorious from this situation. And so she came up with a solution. She promised to guarantee Mabel's custody of the boy, but only if she does not become the Duke's wife. The girl replied that she just wanted to live peacefully with her child. If she could protect him, she would immediately reject the Duke's proposal. The ruler promised to ensure that custody of the boy remained in the hands of the girl. But according to the law of the country, this is impossible. Although there may be some restrictions for the empress, this definitely won't be a problem for her. Even if the nobles object, she will sort everything out. Therefore, the interlocutor need not worry. All a girl has to do is promise something. If the queen provides custody of the child, then she will under no circumstances marry the duke. The girl began to think about this proposal. Doubts began to arise in her head whether to agree to this or not. But in the end, she decided to give the empress a positive answer, and she was very glad that they managed to agree and reach mutual understanding. She also asked not to go back on her words in the future, and yet it is better to keep their conversation a secret from the duke. Both girls understood why. After this, the queen dismissed the guest. Although she understood the strangeness of her question, her curiosity was stronger. After all, they already have a child together whom they both love. The beauty was afraid that her interlocutor might change her mind. But still, she allowed not to answer this question. There were probably serious reasons for this, and the question might seem stupid. The ruler once again congratulated the girl on her return, and Mabel left the royal palace, passing through long corridors. She felt something unpleasant in her soul even after this conversation. However, she was glad that she would receive custody of her son. But even for a queen, it can be difficult to break the law by going against the duke's house. If Her Majesty opposes the law, or if she enters into an arranged marriage with the duke. But she had nothing to lose anyway. Therefore, the girl decided not to worry about anything. Turning around, she saw the duke walking towards her. It is difficult to describe his surprise at their meeting in this place. The guy decided to ask the girl what she was doing here. The heroine urgently needed to come up with an answer. She didn't want to say that the queen's servant asked her to meet, and in general, the girl was not going to come here alone. Therefore, Mabel decided to ask the duke what he was doing here. After visiting Robbie's estate, he came here as he finished his business trip. But the girl never managed to dodge the question. The guy asked him again. The heroine began to come up with new excuses. The version of seeing her brother seemed more or less plausible to her. That's why she voiced it. But the brunette didn't believe it. There were no scheduled meetings that day. Therefore, there is no need for the Marquis to appear in the castle. The girl realized that she had been caught in a lie. The thought flashed through the hero's mind that the blonde had come here to meet Her Majesty. This thought scared him extraordinarily. He couldn't even imagine what the conversation could be about. The girl was scared when she heard the truth. The movement of her hands further betrayed her excitement. The hero couldn't help but notice this. He always saw when the bride was hiding something. He touched her hand and pointed out the trembling of her fingers. They trembled so much that they could not help but give the girl away. It was clear that she really was not telling the truth. She felt bad about being caught. But you can't say anything else. The guy understood everything, so he asked why she was meeting the queen. Wanting to avoid the question, she asked not to take such an insignificant action into her head. The girl said that the guy attaches too much importance to this visit. She and the empress did not discuss any important topics. The guy thought that after this conversation, his beloved probably knew about his experiences, but he used to think that she didn't care. The hero once again asked what the conversation was about, but the girl still did not answer. It was as if she didn't want to give away this secret. The guy realized that the queen told her to remain silent about the conversation, and perhaps even threatened the girl. But she denied it. Mabel said that the duke overreacts to even the smallest things. That's why she doesn't want to say what the conversation was about. The girl once again asked him not to worry about it, but he couldn't leave everything as it was. The guy decided to find out the answer at any cost, but he understood that the bride would not tell him anything. Therefore, he will have to ask the queen himself. Mabel grabbed his arm, trying to stop him. She did not want the hero to ask the queen about their conversation. After all, from the outside, it may look like she complained to him. The duke slowly turned to her. His eyes radiated an unusually warm gaze, and all because the girl, for such a long time, touched him for the first time herself. She took his hand herself. This has never happened recently. The girl's gaze radiated awkwardness from this. It seemed to her that she herself could not understand her action. She asked the duke not to create additional problems for her. Then she headed towards the exit, and the duke began to guess what was going on. He offered to give her a tour of the castle, but Mabel was already leaving, so she was forced to refuse. A beautiful sunset spread its rays across the sky, coloring it in shades of orange, pink, and purple. The sun was slowly falling towards the horizon. The girl came home. Christina met her at the doorstep of the house. The heroine told Chris that she was at a meeting with Her Majesty. The friend was worried about the girl. After all, this was their first meeting with the queen. In addition, Chris knew that her friend had also met the duke. but she had no idea what they were talking about. Mabel was embarrassed to talk about what happened. She wanted it to remain a secret, but still she had to admit that she had received proposals from the Duke and the Queen, and in any case, she will be able to raise Patrick. The girl did not want to become the Duke's wife, but I hoped that time would put everything in its place. The blonde asked her friend to keep this conversation between them. Chris understood everything. At this time, the maid came and called them to dinner, and little Patrick ran towards his mother with joyful hugs. He asked where she had been. The boy wanted to play with the girl, but she left. That's why the child was sad all this time. The young mother said that she had an important meeting. Patrick hoped that this was a meeting with the very uncle he liked. Those present were surprised at this child's assumption. The girl said that the meeting was with another person, but she also wondered why her son remembered the Duke so often. The heroine asked her son whether he had had dinner or not yet. The son replied that he was sadly waiting for his mother to have dinner together. Mabel was ready to do anything to stay with her beloved son. After some time, a meeting was held again in the royal palace. All those present gathered. They looked forward to discussing important issues of the state. One of those present informed the queen that King Teslana wanted her to marry him. This was unexpected for the beauty. She couldn't believe this would happen. However, the king was looking forward to this event. At this moment, the Duke experienced extraordinary relief. He hoped that he would now be free from the queen's advances. The eyes were full of hope. It was a good offer for Her Majesty. The king was very ambitious and generous. All those present supported this opinion. Another subject began to tell me that he also had a friend from Tesla, and he says that the king is distinguished by his intelligence and humanity. Besides this, he is incredibly handsome. This is an excellent opportunity to strengthen cooperation between the two countries. In addition, this state has enormous potential for development. The queen sat at her table deep in thought. Now her heart was already occupied, and she was deciding what to do next. After all, Tesla is truly a country with untapped opportunities. But she wasn't interested in that. The Duke decided to ask again in front of everyone what reasons she had for refusing. The beauty began to tell that their royal family lives away from society. So, a warm welcome from a foreign queen would not be appropriate. Because of this, disagreements may arise in their family. She also would not approve of the king's rule in Freeman. Those present suggested that she choose another aristocrat as her husband. Then the queen suddenly changed the topic. Turning to Demore, she said that she wanted to talk about his child. The empress believed that custody should be transferred to the mother. The ruler only saw him as her husband. But if a child prevents this, then this problem can be solved without hesitation. However, the guy objected. According to royal law, custody rights belong to him, and the laws created by our ancestors should not be broken. The beauty said that everything will be done according to the law. She is the queen and has the right to do so. These words both frightened and saddened the Duke. Deciding to defend himself, he added that by choosing him as a husband, the queen would lose her reputation. Those around him began to support the Duke. The queen's husband must be pure, and if it is different, then the image of both the Duke and the ruler will be destroyed. Regardless of whether the queen accepts the king's proposals or not, she should find a chosen one among the local aristocracy. Another person present said that his son was just looking for a bride. He decided to ask the queen's opinion about this guy. New proposals regarding her future husband rained down on her. The aristocrats asked the beauty to consider these candidates. Despite this, the Duke believed that the child should be raised by his own mother. The queen stopped him and said that she was doing everything for his sake. Although she knew about everything, his fierce loyalty impressed the girl even more. She wanted to repay this. The beauty reminded that once a guy gets married, the boy will become a stain on his marriage. But the brunette asked not to worry about this. The empress did not understand why the interlocutor remained so calm. But then the Duke shocked her. He said that he had decided to marry the child's mother. These words caused great bewilderment among the ruler. The first thing she thought about was what she heard. After all, this couldn't have happened. But the guy continued. He said that he loves this woman and this is obvious to everyone. Plus, they have a child for whom he is responsible. There was an awkward silence in the hall. No one dared to break it or say a word. Several minutes passed like this, but one of those present asked the queen what he should convey to King Tesla. From these words, the hall was filled with loud and ringing laughter. The queen could not contain herself not to laugh, even though it surprised others. The girl asked the Duke if he really thought that Mabel would agree to marry him. She asked if the guy knew the girl's true opinion on this matter. Her and her child. The ruler felt naive and deceived. Just recently she talked with this girl and she promised her not to do that. Now the beauty learns about the opposite outcome of the situation. So she has no choice. The girl ordered the child to be brought to the palace. The duke was unhappy with this order. He feared for his son. There was hatred for the queen in his eyes. Deciding to stand up for him, the guy said that his words came from a pure heart. He even swore on his honor and the honor of his ancestors. The queen replied that she wanted to believe him, but it is better to see once than to hear 100 times. The girl agreed after talking with the child and Mabel to admit defeat. The guy's face became very gloomy. Extreme dissatisfaction was easily read in his eyes. The Grand Duke looked like this because of some boy. No matter what the guy encountered before or heard, he always remained impeccably calm. But because of these two, his calmness left him. The queen asked the duke to show her his son. Otherwise, everyone will be punished. This conversation took place during the day in the royal palace, and in the evening the details of this conversation were told to Mabel by her brother. After all, he was present there too. It looks like the queen's pride has been badly wounded. Otherwise, why would she show everyone that the duke was wrong? The blonde was worried about her son, because he was only 4 years old. She didn't want him to be shown off as an aristocrat at that age. The girl inquired about the duke's reaction and answer. Was he against it? The brother replied that the duke was treated cruelly in front of everyone. The queen promised the girl to transfer custody, but in the end she stuck a knife into her. Mabel wasn't afraid of her, but she couldn't let Patrick get hurt. To protect her son, the girl went to the duke. Approaching his mansion, she saw that these places had not changed a bit. Upon entering, she was greeted by a servant. They haven't seen him for a long time. Mr. Lawrence did not seem to change during this time. He led the girl through the corridors of the palace. In the corridor, the bright rays of the sun glistened on the floor. Even this corridor remained the same. The walls and powerful columns have not changed at all. Some things have changed, though. These are the ones who lived in this house. A young mother came into the guy's office to talk and protect her son. The duke was incredibly happy to see the girl. His face broke into a smile at the sight of his guest. He was truly surprised. The hero did not expect Mabel to come here, but he understood that the reason for the girl's coming was not related to the desire to see him. The reason must be much more serious. Surely something happened to the girl. No matter what, the brunette would be happy to help her. But now was not the time to say flattering words to each other. After all, the heroine heard what happened at the last meeting in the kingdom. The guy did not want to discuss this issue with the guest. But nevertheless, she asked her ex-fiancé's opinion about this situation. The duke decided to calm the girl down. He said that no one was going to put their son on public display. After all, there is a way to show it only to the queen. Therefore, you should not worry so much about this situation. However, the girl said that the queen had previously promised to transfer custody to her, provided that Mabel does not marry the hero. And because of what happened, she began to worry that the promise would not be fulfilled. During the conversation, the girl was very worried. After all, now she needed to give a final answer to the guy. Having thought it over again, she agreed to become his wife for a year. The hero felt as if he had been doused with cold water. His beloved's answer was so unexpected for him, but on the other hand, he was unusually happy with her decision. He couldn't believe she agreed. Since the queen wants to see Patrick and has put forward such conditions, then it was time for the girl to put herself in a more advantageous position. The guy still could not say a word, as he tried to understand the motives of his beloved. Mabel asked why he was looking at her like that, but the hero expressed surprise at the reason for such an act. He stood up from his chair and looked at the girl with a piercing gaze. She couldn't understand what was happening. After all, with such an act, she wanted to show that she trusted the guy more than the queen. The hero came closer to her and, bending down, said that he was very worried about her. She's probably worried about him too. But Mabel objected. She tried to explain that she had no such motives. She's just sorry that she and her son caused so much trouble for the duke. However, the guy never considered them a burden to himself. And a mistake too. He will never consider them that way in the future. And in general, the opinions of others were not so important for the guy. The heroine could not understand why the guy said such words. After all, there are a lot of rumors about them now. But the brunette suggested not to pay attention to them. It was difficult for the young mother. It's hard to ignore what other people say. After all, everyone around was just discussing them. How could such problems mean nothing? But by this she once again proved that she was worried about the guy, even though her words said otherwise. The girl considered this simple politeness towards the father of her child. The heroine asked the groom to keep his promise, to let her go after a year. The Duke offered to draw up an agreement so that the girl would not worry and would trust him. Demore also remembered the promise to appoint his son as successor to the estate. He made sure to mention this point in the contract, even though it was not important for the girl now. Without realizing it, she was very happy with this guy's act. And now her son Patrick will escape everyone's hatred. The contract will be notarized by their lawyer. There will be no problems with this. But Mabel realized that Patrick would still have to be introduced to the queen. However, she came up with a much simpler solution. The castle at night was shrouded in a mysterious atmosphere. The moonlight penetrated through the high window arches and created a play of shadows on the walls. And in the room, the girl put her son to bed, surrounding him with care and warmth. The time was late. The child should no longer hesitate to go to sleep. The little boy, hugging a teddy bear, happily immersed himself in games. He was unaware of the secrets hiding behind the castle walls. The heroine was thinking about how to tell her son about his father. Mabel decided to ask Patrick if he remembered the Duke who came to see him. The kid immediately remembered the tall and handsome uncle. For some reason, he liked to remember this man. The child thought that he wanted to visit them. After all, they haven't had him for a long time. But his mother explained that the Duke is a very busy man. The girl asked the child if he wanted his uncle to come visit again. The boy agreed with a joyful cry. The heroine was very surprised by this, because they barely knew each other. But the kid continued to talk about this man only from the good side. This surprised Mabel very much, although such a reaction from her son will certainly make it easier for her to explain. The most important thing for the girl was that the Duke be accepted by his son. And she was glad that the child liked the man. The girl asked her son what he thought about living together with that uncle. The boy answered with a joyful voice that he would be glad if he lived in the same house with him. But the heroine clarified that the question about living in her uncle's house. She wanted to know if her son would agree to this option. The child agreed to this too. Even though I didn't know this person very well, and yet the boy had never been to his house. And if he moved, he would not be able to see his aunts and uncles. The girl wanted this not to upset the child either. The boy replied that he really liked his new uncle, and they will be able to visit their relatives, uncle and aunt. But then the child asked an unexpected question. He said that since Mom and he would live at this uncle's house, she would probably marry him. Curiosity shone in the child's eyes. He was interested in knowing the answer to his question. His aunt said that when people love each other, they get married. The child realized that his mother loved this man. But the girl assured the boy that she loved her son much more than the others. This was pleasant for the baby to hear. But he asked again if his mother loved his father. Mabel was very surprised how her son realized that that man was his father. And she decided that it was better to really tell now. Otherwise, it will be too late later. Her son is a smart boy. Therefore, he will understand everything. The heroine started a conversation. She said the Duke's name but could not say a word further. However, the boy continued. He said it was his dad. The girl was amazed how the baby knew everything. After all, she didn't talk about it. The child said he was just guessing. His hair color is like his mother's, and his eyes are the same color as his father's. It was the same with his friends, and he made a conclusion based on the general eye color. Patrick was a very smart boy, and Mabel was afraid that she would hurt him when she told him about it. Because of this, she hid the truth from her son about his father. The boy had a hard time understanding why this would hurt anyone. The girl replied that it was all because her uncle was not around. The child said that there were probably reasons for this, so Mom doesn't have to worry about it. He was very happy that now the three of them would live together. The heroine asked again whether her little son was upset because of this news. Surprisingly, the boy reacted very maturely to the absence. But in fact, the child simply did not understand why he should be upset. Despite his age, he had his own thoughts. But for a long time, the girl perceived them in her own way. It turned out that this baby is older than even his mother. It was already late and they needed to fall asleep. The girl covered her son with a blanket. He asked her to sing him a lullaby. He began to fall asleep to the gentle voice of his mother and the sweet melody. The heroine looked at her little son with tenderness. She understood that he was a very wonderful baby. At this time, the maids kept the Duke of Quinterel's estate especially clean. They cleaned all the rooms until they were sparkling, so that the owners will definitely like it. At this time, Margarita arrived. She said that guests would arrive very soon. Therefore, preparation must be completed as soon as possible. However, everything was almost ready. Margot decided to find her brother. If he is late, there may be problems. The servant said that he warned the guy before leaving, and he promised not to be late. Even on such a joyful day for him, the guy showed himself to be a workaholic. But this is a difficult event, and it's his birthday. The hero's sister was worried that he would be late for congratulations. Then it will be a real nightmare. She wanted everything to go smoothly this time. But I understood that this was unlikely to happen. She had a very strange feeling, as if something bad is going to happen. As night fell, the castle suddenly came to life. Numerous guests began to gather at the Duke's house. At this time of night, the queen drove up to the mansion. She was so beautiful, like a moon goddess. Her unique beauty radiated nobility and charm. Her gaze, like moonlight, penetrates the darkness and illuminates the hearts of her subjects. The beauty arrived with her faithful maid Chris. She asked the girl if the gift was ready for the Duke. It was strange for the queen that she felt uneasy today, as if she sensed something bad ahead. The gift was already completely ready for delivery. It was possible to enter the estate. The servants understood that it was time for the Empress to surrender. After all, she is unlikely to win the favor of the Duke. But no one dared to say it out loud. After all, everyone was afraid of falling out of favor with the ruler. Entering the hall, the queen caught the envious glances of those around her. She looked truly incredible. Those around her joyfully greeted her. The queen decided to find out where the Duke was. At that moment, he was just entering the hall. The hero's sister made an incredibly wonderful banquet, and the guests emphasized this with compliments to the guy. The Empress called out to the brunette. Turning around, he saw the girl, but he did not dare to take a single step forward. The guy looked at the beauty from afar. Bowing, he thanked the queen for coming, but she couldn't help but come, because today is the birthday of her loved one. The beauty asked if the guy worked today. However, the Duke's behavior spoke for itself. He probably didn't have a day off today. The ruler decided to flatter the guy. She said that preparing what was promised must have been tedious. The hero decided to take advantage of the situation and asked for rest. The queen did not see anything wrong with this and offered to take a vacation at any time. She decided to tell him about the gift she had prepared for him. They could open it together. The guy politely refused. He said that he was honored just by the queen's coming here. The queen said that this gift was very valuable, so it should be opened now. But the guy decided to open it when they were among other people. Then the queen's kindness would become known to everyone. This answer amazed the beauty very much, but she decided not to voice her thoughts out loud. The girl thanked the guy for thinking that way about her. Standing in the middle of the hall, the Duke asked to bring him the queen's gift. It had to be opened by the birthday boy personally. The beauty once again congratulated her beloved. After thanking her, Demore began to open the gift. It contained ancient clothes that the queen's great-grandfather had worn. These were this man's favorite clothes. The queen's great-grandfather was the first and only queen consort in Fromagne's history. He wore this outfit to all official events. The gift revealed the beauty's intentions. She asked the Duke's opinion about the present, but he packed it again and promised to keep the clothes. Then the queen again began trying to care for the guy. She invited the two of them to dance. To her surprise, the guy refused. Today he already has a pair. The queen really did not like refusals. This always made her angry. Out of curiosity, she asked who his partner was for today. The guy said that he was just looking for a suitable occasion to introduce this girl. Approaching the door, he invited the guest to enter. It seems that the queen herself pushed him to take such a step. The guy brought his son and his mother into the hall. In front of everyone, the Duke announced that he was going to marry this girl. With a heavy heart and anguish in her soul, the queen stood in the middle of the hall. She realized that the love she had worked so hard to build had slipped from her grasp. Her gaze was full of melancholy and pain. The face expressed deep confusion. She felt lost and alone among the crowd of other people. The rejected ruler was tormented by thoughts, because everything she fought for is now just an echo in her broken heart. The Duke, along with his bride and child, stood in the middle of the hall. Mabel said he wasn't as confused as she expected, but the guy replied that he had no other choice. At that moment, the queen asked to open the gift in front of everyone, and the Duke knew exactly her intentions. He talked to her about this topic many times, but the ruler did not agree to leave him alone. Therefore, he had to do this for the sake of his beloved. Despite the fact that I had to go against the Empress, Mabel understood perfectly well and could not say anything against this. And no matter what, now Patrick needed to be taken away from prying eyes. But the boy asked to go to the party. His parents tried to calm him down, promising to take the baby to the next event. The guy called the servant to take the child. The devoted servant approached the owner and carried out his instructions, so that the boy would not worry. His parents waved after him. And so on until the servant brought him into the room. The Duke was very happy that his beloved was now next to him. He hugged her because he really missed the time when they were together. Now no matter what, they will soon get married. And their wedding will be impossible to cancel. The guy was incredibly happy about this outcome of events. He loved this girl very much even after she disappeared. The Duke's love has been tested by time. The girl had no doubt that he would always love her. That's what the Duke thought. But Mabel herself was tormented by doubts. She was worried that his feelings for her had changed. This was quite an important question. After all, her right to custody of Patrick was at stake, and she will not allow her emotions to control her. The hardest part was left to the young people. It was necessary to confirm to the guests that they were together again. Many considered the girl dead. Now she has appeared in public for the first time in a long time. The guests could not understand where the lady was hiding all the time. The moonlight gently hugged the earth, scattering silver rays. Stars, like diamonds, decorated the night sky, creating a magical picture. Mabel went out onto the balcony to enjoy the night views. She was very tired of such close attention to herself. It was hard for the girl to listen to the gossip of others. It seemed to her that the 2 hours at the party lasted forever. She had not attended social events for a very long time. That's why they bombarded her with questions. It's good that there were no relatives yet. Otherwise, the rumors would have spread to them. Someone said that she was great because she raised her child alone for 4 years. Others said she was hiding something. After all, she doesn't talk about the past. And having learned everything, the Duke certainly would not have married her. Various assumptions were heard long after its appearance. But the girl understood that she should not pay attention to these words. Suddenly she heard someone calling her. It was the Duke's sister. Mabel warmly greeted her old friend. Margot said that she heard about the girl moving in with them. She expressed her joy to the guests at this meeting. But still, the Duke's sister did not expect this meeting to be like this. The blonde regretted that she disappeared without warning anyone. Surely Margot was also alarmed by this. The girl asked if the queen had already given the order to show the child to all the aristocrats. Yes, this order has already been given. The heroine was worried that the queen would not harm Patrick. Therefore, she had no other choice. She didn't want the Duke's reputation to decline so rapidly. All these words surprised Margot. She thought about them seriously. This meant that the lady still loved her brother. The girl wanted to know if she understood this situation correctly, but Mabel began to make excuses. She said that she was doing this only for the sake of her son, and the marriage story is a guarantee that custody will be transferred to her. Nevertheless, the hostess was glad that a new person would live in their house. She was also pleased that the girl would become her daughter-in-law. She didn't know what happened between them in the past, but she hoped that her curiosity would not be a burden when visiting. The joyful groom approached the talking girls. His sister started asking him questions. After all, he didn't tell her about his plan. It turned out that the guy knew what he had done. The girl asked to warn him about such things next time. After all, she was very scared for him. But when the guy returned, his sister was very happy about it. Margot decided to leave the young couple, because she understood that her brother was not looking for her. The lovers watched the girl go, and they were left alone on the balcony in the middle of the night. They stood and looked at each other, trying to find the right words. The silence was broken by the girl's phrase. She asked the guy what happened. She thought he looked worried. The Duke said that he was simply worried about his beloved, and I wanted to know if everything was okay with her. The guy understood that the girl had not attended such events for a long time. And then there were people with such strange questions. But Mabel asked not to worry about her. The girl replied that she was having fun, but now she would like to rest. Against the backdrop of the night sky glowing with the moon, 2 lovers stood on the balcony. Their gazes intertwined like stars in the sky. But the time had come to say goodbye, and squeezing his lover's hand, the guy smiled as she left. The Duke had no more questions for his beloved. The guy called out to her and asked her to wait a little. He noticed the flower in the girl's hair. After that, she continued to her room. The guy was left alone on the balcony, his gaze falling on the dark garden below. Something mysterious flickered in the shadows. Suddenly, he made out a ghostly silhouette gliding between the trees. His heart beat faster. At that moment, he realized that the night was hiding much more than he could have imagined. He stood leaning on the railing and looked at the silhouette, lost in his thoughts. His eyes showed both joy and concern. The Duke knew that their happiness could be overshadowed by the impending danger. But she wasn't afraid. He believed in Mabel and their love. The fate of the lovers remained unknown. After all, the queen could not leave everything as it was. She already had a new plan for these two. However, will they be able to overcome all obstacles? And whether the guy wants to let his beloved go after a year, time will tell. A question was raised in the estate about the time of Mabel's arrival. Margot was studying the documents at this time. Her brother's question began to distract her. It was difficult for the girl to concentrate on her task, so she asked her brother to keep quiet. After all, he asked the same question for the second time. But the guy himself didn't notice this. His thoughts were directed only to the arrival and meeting of the girl. The brunette was looking forward to this time. He didn't notice anything around him. It seemed to him that Mabel had been gone for a very long time. After all, 3 days have already passed. Time dragged on painfully long, and every hour seemed like an eternity. His heart languished, and his thoughts rushed to only one thing, to the long-awaited meeting. The Duke looked forward to the time when they would finally be together as a real family. The guy's sister was surprised at the strength of his feelings. The guy remembered how his beloved suddenly disappeared, and then appeared. However, she has not yet given the reason for her disappearance. Margarita understood that in her brother's place she would not have been able to stand it. D'Amour hoped that their feelings were mutual, and if not, then nothing could be done. Then it will be better to break up with the girl. But it could have been done differently. You could make a girl love you. It was incredible for the guy that more than 5 years had passed. It turns out that such was the power of his love. The sister listened carefully to her brother. She saw that his feelings for Mabel were indeed very strong. But the Duke understood that the Queen could have feelings for him as strong as he had for Mabel. Her Majesty wanted to have everything. It must have been difficult for the Queen to come to terms with the fact that she was refused for the first time. And the Duke's words sounded true. The beauty was really not used to this. A guy asked his sister if she liked someone. At her age, it was time to think about marriage. But Margot herself didn't think so. She still had plenty of time ahead. Lady Mirabelle, Mabel's sister, was the same age as she. But until now she remained unmarried. Therefore, the brunette believed that she also had no need to rush. D'Amour was so thoughtful that he didn't even immediately understand who his sister gave as an example. Margot had to explain who this lady was. The thought flashed through the girl's head that her brother might simply not have known her. But later the guy remembered that he had already seen her several times. He was also surprised how his sister knew her. The girls once met at a reception and decided to talk. But that was a long time ago, and their conversation was short. Therefore, they could not be called close relationships. D'Amour continued, saying that he was younger than Margot when he met his beloved. While the relatives were talking, a servant entered the room. He reported that a carriage with luggage had arrived. The Duchess has already arrived at the palace. The guy was even more worried, and he again asked the maid if everything was ready as it should be. His sister tried to calm him down, saying that she took care of everything herself. Before the girl had time to finish speaking, her brother was no longer in the room. With unprecedented speed, he went to meet his beloved wife and his son. At that time, Mabel had already gotten out of the carriage and was looking at her new home. Seeing the guy, she showed joy. She said that she had arrived quite recently. D'Amour said that he was really glad to meet her, since they were now husband and wife. The brunette hugged the girl and pressed her to him. He really wanted her to feel comfortable. The hero asked how the trip went. The Duke tried to organize everything well, so the girl arrived in extraordinary comfort. And everything was thanks to her husband. A boy came out of the carriage to meet his father. He greeted him, still calling him uncle. The child was glad that he would now live with a new family. His eyes sparkled with joy and happiness. And there was a smile on his face. But the boy did not dare to come closer and held on to his mother's dress. The adults were surprised that the baby called the Duke uncle. After all, he already knew that it was his father. They were even confused and did not know how to behave further. But the brunette dared to break this silence. He asked his wife if she had told the child who his father was. The girl said that he knew everything, but she didn't understand why the baby responded that way. Patrick pressed himself even closer to his mother's dress and averted his gaze from the Duke. With all his appearance, he showed embarrassment. This behavior was, in principle, familiar to children, and his parents knew about it. The father tried to calm his son down, telling him that everything was fine. He didn't want to rush things, and while taking care of the child, he wanted him to feel comfortable. They haven't seen each other for a long time. The boy used to always call him that. Therefore, the Duke invited his son to call him whatever he wanted. If the child is used to calling him uncle, then so be it. This calmed the baby down a lot. Now he no longer held on to his mother's dress. He felt that this uncle was very kind to him. And the Duke continued to look at his son, showing with all his appearance that he should not be afraid or embarrassed. Afterwards, he offered his son a snack, suggesting that they would probably get hungry on the road. A whole range of emotions was visible in the boy's big blue eyes. There was a sparkle of joy in them, but at the same time there was also uncertainty. The child's smile could not completely hide the internal struggle. Sadness timidly hid in the corners of his lips, as if he did not fully believe his happiness. The father extended his hand to the child. Suddenly the child also reached out to the man. Timur realized that the boy was no longer afraid or embarrassed of him. He took his little hand and took him to the palace. Mabel watched this. She was pleased that her husband found a common language with his son. After all, her son was the most important thing in her life. The heroine, of course, was worried about how the boy would react to the change in their life. But at the same time, she was very happy, realizing that there was no need to worry anymore. The mother's gaze was filled with tenderness and care, as if she wanted to protect her child from all the troubles of the world. And she was ready to do anything to make him happy. The father took the child to his new room. She was big and very beautiful. The Duke hoped that his son would like it very much. In a cozy corner of the room there was a small blue sofa. Its soft form seemed to invite the young owner of the room to relax and dream. The walls of the room were decorated with paintings of favorite fairy tale characters. On the shelves were figurines depicting animals and fairy tale characters. The blonde, meanwhile, walking along the corridor of the palace, met Margot. She thanked her for her efforts in preparing the rooms. Mabel thought that there was no point in trying so hard. After all, there were too many things in the room now. But the hostess considered all this a trifle. After all, the guest was now the wife of the Duke himself. Margot was interested to know the girl's impression of their rooms, and she replied that she really liked it. The rooms were simply magnificent. Having accepted the praise, the owner said that she came up with their design herself. And I didn't know what I would do if the guests were unhappy. But the new Duchess assured that everything turned out very beautifully. It was clear that the hostess put her whole soul into that work. However, Margot wondered why the blonde was avoiding her brother. A few minutes earlier, the servants had already carried the guests' clothes to their rooms. But when the Duke invited his son to show him the estate, Mabel refused to go with them, saying that she needed to get settled. And at lunch, the girl behaved quietly. The food was very tasty, though. Therefore, the hostess had questions for the new arrival. But the girl began to deny it, saying that everything was wrong. As for Patrick, he behaved calmly. But there was still some lack of connection between him and his father. Therefore, the heroine was worried about how her son would get used to his dad. After all, she was here precisely for Patrick. Margot was very surprised by her words. She invited the interlocutor to continue the conversation over a cup of tea. Mabel agreed, but she needed to check something. At the same time, the father showed his son the palace. He took him into his office and told him that he spent a lot of time here. The boy was amazed at how big this office was. A massive wooden cabinet, like a giant from a fairy tale, towered against the wall. Its surface, darkened by time, retained traces of history and faded patterns. There was also a library in the office. The child began to wonder if there were fairy tales in this library. But they weren't here. But the father realized that his son loved to read. The Duke decided to think about how to acquire them. He invited the child to come to this office whenever he wanted to read or talk. The boy agreed with his father's words. However, he still felt a little awkward or even awkward in this house. Moving away from the Duke, he headed towards the exit. This behavior of the child upset his father a little. The hero thought that his son didn't like him. Therefore, I decided to ask the boy about this. He told the child that he felt that he was more unpleasant to him than before. The father wanted to find out if this was really so. The kid replied that when they met, it was immediately clear that this man was his father. After all, their eyes were very similar to each other. And so it was. The boy turned out to be very attentive, but the father asked if the child was upset because of what his mother told him. Or maybe he was angry. After all, they were separated for 4 years. With sad eyes, the baby reported how he told his mother that everything was fine. In reality, everything was different. The boy's hands were tense as he told this. The fingers seemed to be fingering something in their hand. The kid said that he didn't like the Duke. He used to think that days with his father would become more fun. Perhaps they would play together, do manly things, or spend time together in some way. The father listened carefully to the child, trying to understand his feelings and how best to behave with his son in order to improve their relationship. The kid asked if the Duke would always be by his side. He said that if his uncle promised to always stay with him and his mother, then he could call him father, and if not, then he will not have a father. Despite his age, the boy behaved quite decisively. His voice didn't even tremble as he spoke. However, the Duke did not have the same determination during the conversation. He couldn't even immediately find the words to answer his son. But, plucking up courage, he said that he would never leave him with his mother. The child was happy about this. The hero even promised that this would definitely happen. It seemed that now they could not make peace. The Duke asked the boy again whether he would call him Dad. The kid tried to pronounce this word, but it was very unusual for him to pronounce it. Not one, but even several attempts were unsuccessful. He couldn't say the word Dad in front of the Duke. Everything took some getting used to. Surely time would put everything in its place. Demore did not resent his child but was grateful for the honesty. He assured the boy that everything was fine. The hero took the baby by the hand, wanting to show that he was not offended by him. But then the boy asked to take care of his mother. Saying this, the child addressed the hero with the words Dad. It was said very naturally, and the baby's face at that moment shone with joy. This made the Duke incredibly happy. He promised to fulfill his son's request. There was no need to worry so much about the unknown. After all, the Duke was very confident in himself. Margot and Mabel walked down the stairs together. They didn't want to have a conversation together, but Lauren's servant was already waiting for them at the Duchess's request. All the servants gathered together, but it seemed like someone was missing. The girl looked carefully at everyone's faces, as if she was trying to find someone specific among them, but she never saw that face. The girl asked Laurent if he was sure that all the servants were there. He answered in the affirmative. The servant also asked the heroine what happened. Without giving an answer to the question, she asked if anyone had quit in recent years. And so it was. Many servants left the estate. Then the Duke's sister entered the conversation. She decided to ask what exactly the newly arrived guest wanted to check, or who she was looking for specifically, but the girl again avoided answering. In order not to give away the truth, she decided to come up with something similar to it. The heroine said that she asked everyone to gather because she was becoming the mistress of this mansion. Perhaps she was missing a lot, but she hoped that the servants would be able to take care of her and her son. After all, this is His Majesty's son. However, completely different thoughts arose in the blonde's head. She was wondering how she could find the servants who had previously quit. The heroine wanted to find out who tried to kill her. After all, while it was still a secret, she needed to be careful. The servants decided to introduce themselves formally once again. The butler Lawrence started first. Next, Michelle, the head maid, entered the conversation. The girl thanked them, but her thoughts were far away. And then the Duke and his son approached. When they went down the stairs together, the child ran to hug his mother. Damore wanted to say something, and the fact that everyone gathered here was very opportune. The guy called Janet to introduce her. This woman was Margot's nanny. She said it was an honor to meet her owner again. The Duke told who Margot would live on which floor. The boy disagreed, but what exactly he disagreed with, his father could not understand. The girl whispered to her husband that in a year she would look after her son herself. The Duke quickly began to think of what to answer, and then I found a suitable thought which he decided to voice. The guy suggested that his wife trusts the nanny, and Patrick now has to sleep alone. After all, this is what every family does. After all, his mother also had her own personal life, and this should not be forgotten. Although the Duke was right, Mabel was not used to this. Demore decided to ask his son if he could sleep alone, but the thought of being completely alone scared the child. After all, he didn't even know what to do if a ghost appeared. It seems that the baby was not ready for such changes, but his father began to reassure him that everything would be fine, and if the ghost appears, they will be able to defeat it. Because his dad is strong and is not afraid of anything. After all, a child had to learn to sleep alone in order to become a great adult. The boy decided to ask his mother if he really needed to do this in order to grow up, and his mother confirmed this. However, she assured that if he was scared, his parents would come to him. And when the baby is bored, they will definitely play with him. Janet will help him change clothes and take a bath. The parents increasingly felt that such changes frightened their son. He stood among strangers and did not know how to behave. Mabel decided to praise him for his good behavior, and the nanny expressed hope that they would get along. It's time for dinner. The Duke made sure that a lot of delicious food was prepared, and how much they were able to find out in the dining room. It really was enough to fill you up. The day was approaching evening. The sun painted a sunset on the horizon. Patrick and his parents came to the dining room. He thought there was too much food. They couldn't eat it all. The child is not used to such luxury, and what he saw pleasantly surprised him. At this time, the Duke noticed that his wife looked sad. He decided to ask what happened. If the food is not tasty, you can take another dish. However, it wasn't about the food. This is the first time Demore has attended the dinner. But Margot was also with them. She noted her brother's efforts in preparing for their move. She even had to remove some dishes from the menu. But she left the most delicious ones. Still, this environment was unusual for the girl, and it was hard for her to gather her thoughts and not show her anxiety. Little Patrick learned to use a knife and fork. Therefore, his mother decided to help him in this difficult matter. She understood that many things were unusual for her son today. The child decided to ask how easy it was for his mother to use the knife. She replied that over time this would become quite commonplace for him. The Duke decided to show concern for his family and showed the already cut dishes. He was worried that the food wouldn't get cold while the others were eating it. The girl silently took the plate. This surprised the boy. He was taught to always say thank you, but for some reason his mom didn't tell his dad. The child was taught to always thank for help, and that was right. Margot noted that the boy was very well-mannered and praised him. However, Mabel noted something else. After Patrick and his father walked and talked, he began to use the word dad. This made the heroine very happy. She thanked her husband for his help. After dinner, the Duke suggested a walk around the garden or mansion, but the girl said that she would like to rest a little. When dinner was over, they began to go to their rooms. Mabel went to her room, hoping that the nanny would put her son to bed. When the girl lay down on the bed, she heard a knock on the room. Opening the door, she saw her husband. She was curious to know what brought him to her. She assumed the Duke had a question, but he just wanted to come and see how his wife was doing. After all, from today they became spouses. The girl thought that her husband had come to see her. In principle, that's how it was. Later, the heroine asked her husband to return to his room. After all, they had an arranged marriage. However, those around him did not know the whole truth. These words alarmed the girl a little. She tried to understand what exactly her husband meant. Demore continued further. The brunette said that if Mabel wanted to play, then they could play. He touched her face with his hand and the girl became scared. She was afraid that her husband would make sure everyone knew about them. The blonde took timid steps back. She didn't know how to behave in this situation. There was confusion and fear in her eyes. After all, they were a couple now. This means that they must spend the first night together. But Mabel did not expect her husband to follow the laws so strictly. In addition, it was not necessary to report to anyone, especially in front of the servants. But it was these maids who prepared the bed for them. The guy gently stroked his beloved's hair, and her heart was beating wildly with fear. It seems she was not ready for this. Plucking up courage, the girl pushed her husband away and told him to stop. The heroine believed that the Duke came here to calm his passion. Both looked at each other with dissatisfied looks. Their plans for tonight did not coincide. The guy realized that this was not the beginning of family life he had imagined. Everything went wrong. After all, his wife understood his feelings perfectly. If it weren't for his love for her, he wouldn't have done this. The guy assured the girl that he loved her very much. This means he will try not to offend her. Closing his eyes, the hero wanted to kiss Mabel, and it seems she didn't mind. But at that moment, someone knocked on the door. Opening it, the girl saw Margot. The heroine thought that something had happened, but Patrick immediately entered the room. The brunette said that the baby was looking for his mother, and she decided to help him. Mabel was very sorry that this happened. After that, the hostess left. The girl asked her son if he knew how to find his room. The boy remembered this very well. However, it was very difficult for him to fall asleep without his mother. A lullaby always helped him calm down before bed. Therefore, the heroine invited her son to take him to the room and sing a lullaby. The boy happily agreed. Before leaving the room, he waved to Dad. The Duke wished his son pleasant dreams. The Duke's heart ached from the insult he had inflicted on his wife. He didn't want to hurt her, but his impulse was sincere. Confusion reigned in his soul. He didn't know how to make amends and win back Mabel's favor. A feeling of guilt tormented him. The hero reproached himself for his incontinence and for not thinking about his wife's feelings. There was sadness in his eyes for the rash act that darkened their wedding night. So the night passed. In the morning, the spacious room was very bright. Huge windows let in the morning sun, filling the room with warm light. The walls were decorated with paintings. There were elegant flower pots with flowers in the corners. Bookcases filled with books lined the walls. The unfamiliar surroundings and noise kept Mabel from sleeping all night. When she opened her eyes, she saw the Duke in front of her. He sat on the edge of the bed and smiled at her. He wished her good morning and asked how she slept. Mabel only nodded gloomily in response. Suddenly she jumped out of bed and screamed. There was horror on the girl's face and her eyes were full of fear. She couldn't stop. Her screams echoed throughout the entire estate. The servants, hearing the noise, ran into the room. But in the room, the servant saw a completely calm atmosphere. The girl was on the bed, and her husband was next to her. The guy said that the servants can be free, since everything is fine with them. No one could understand the reason for these screams. The Duke waved his hand at them, indicating that they were free to leave. And he himself wanted to figure out what happened to Mabel. Damore told his wife he didn't expect her to react that way. He couldn't understand why she was so scared. The girl began to explain the reason for her fear. She didn't like the Duke entering her room without permission. After all, it's early morning. Moreover, he was dressed. Yesterday, the heroine behaved more seriously. And now she didn't even say her husband's name. She decided to ask what brought her husband to her at such an early time. He replied that he just wanted to offer to have breakfast together. He only wanted to wake up his wife. Even though this is the work of servants, the guy wanted to do it himself. But Mabel asked him to warn about such things in advance. Yesterday's dinner together was enough for her. The girl preferred to go to the dining room separately. But it seemed strange to the Duke. After all, then the maids might suspect something. And there was no reason to object to spending time together, even at breakfast. In a year, they will still divorce and live separately. But now they had to act like a couple. All so that those around them consider them as such. Wanting to finally convince his wife, the guy said one more reason. It was Patrick. Their son thought that his parents were madly in love with each other. But due to circumstances, their paths diverged. And now they are together again. The Duke wanted to show his only son true happiness. And the girl agreed with him. The guy conveyed his son's words to his wife. He was ready to call him dad if they never separated again. There was an awkward silence in the room. The boy really thought so. So his mother decided to try to behave like a good wife. The girl again asked her husband to leave the room. She wanted to change clothes. The heroine could not help but pay attention to the presence of her husband in the room. The Duke agreed to go out, but asked his wife to quickly go down to breakfast. Coming out of the room, the guy looked very happy. His sister and son were just passing by in the corridor. Patrick wanted to see his mother again. So Margot brought him to Mabel's room. But Damore told Patrick that his mother was busy right now. While she is changing, they can just go down to the table. The child agreed and took his dad's hand. He really wanted his son to talk to him freely about everything. Looking at her brother and nephew, the girl understood that her brother really liked family life. The dining room was ready for breakfast. There were delicious dishes on the table, and a cozy atmosphere reigned around. And so the whole family gathered in the dining room. The boy began to tell his mother that he had a very beautiful dream. The girl was glad to hear this. After all, she was worried about her son. Mabel thought that when the boy woke up, he would be afraid that she was not there. But fortunately, this did not happen. Waking up, Patrick obeyed the nanny. The child proudly talked about how obedient he was. Of course, this could not but please the parents. Now they didn't have to worry so much about him. The boy said that not only parents are worried now, he also has reasons to worry. The parents asked what these reasons were. The kid said he was worried because his father slept with his mother. The child was worried whether his dad was treating his mom well. Out of surprise, Mabel asked her son why he thought so. But the boy replied that this is what husband and wife do. The nanny told him this. The kid thought it was true, but after his mother's words, he began to doubt it. The girl was very embarrassed because of such stories from the nanny. She was ashamed to discuss such things in front of other people. But the father continued the conversation. He said the nanny was right, and all because Patrick's mother is now his wife. The girl did not know how to react to such adult conversations. After all, I was afraid of the Duke's similar behavior in life. It seems she was not yet ready to spend nights with her husband in the same room. The next event took place in the Queen's palace. She was told that Damore and Mabel were now living together. This news caused the beauty to lose her appetite. She could no longer calmly drink tea, as her thoughts were occupied with something else. This was a big surprise for her. It seemed that only recently the Duke was almost hers, but he turned out to be very smart. And after taking a few days off, the guy managed to get married. But the Queen didn't even think about it. The beauty was reassured by the fact that the Duke had finally taken a day off, albeit for a few days. Because of this, the Empress felt very naive and stupid. She ordered someone to be sent to the Quinterelle estate immediately, all in order to convey an invitation. The number of duchesses has increased, so it was necessary to invite as many ladies as possible. The servant obediently and carefully listened to the ruler. The Queen decided that the time had come to have a tea party, and Mabel continued to get acquainted with the servants. Because this time Bonnie Mercy came to them. Her family was involved in charity work, and Miss Bonnie herself will now be in the girls' care. The guest was warmly welcomed into this house. The Duchess decided to ask what brought Miss to them. But Bonnie replied that his lordship asked her to train the young master. Mabel was surprised that she was not informed about this. But Demore said the decision was made quickly. Patrick needed to be taught the basics of noble life, and Miss was ready to do everything possible to teach the baby. It was decided to start today with acquaintance and make tomorrow the first day of training. The servants led Bonnie into the boy's room. The Duchess was surprised why her husband hired a teacher without asking her. But the girl was not angry. After all, it was still a good decision. However, it came as a real surprise to her. And because of this, the heroine was even a little upset. She really wanted the decision regarding her son's upbringing to be discussed with her as well. The guy said he wanted to talk to the girl about it, but that was the night she kicked him out of her room. Mabel considered these words to be untrue. It seemed impossible to her to find the teacher in the morning. Mabel believed that Bonnie had most likely been hired a few days ago. And the girl was right. There was immediate silence in the room. The Duke was unpleasant that his beloved caught him in a lie, so he decided to apologize. In fact, the guy was afraid that Mabel would be against it. She constantly said that their marriage would not last, just for 1 year. However, he still decided to ask his wife's opinion about the teacher. Having thought it over again, the girl realized that the decision was indeed a good one, so she won't mind. Although perhaps it was too early for Patrick. He was just beginning to get used to everything, because there was so much new and unknown around him. The girl was afraid that it would be difficult for her son to get used to it. The guy replied that the children of nobles begin their education at the same age as Patrick, but he had already asked the teacher not to be strict with his son, so there was no need to worry about him. During this year, Demore wanted to do everything possible for the family that he could, including for his child, about whom he knew nothing for so long. Previously, he also had to take part in raising his son, but he couldn't do this. The hero understood that the girl was unlikely to understand the feelings of a man who wanted to become a good father. Mabel was very impressed by these words. She was pleased that the Duke wanted to be a good father to her son. After all, the child was very important to her. But if Demore had been a bad father, things would have been much easier for her herself. As a result, the couple agreed to warn each other about decisions regarding the upbringing of their joint son, so that there are no surprises in the future. The guy asked how his wife was feeling. Perhaps she wants to ask him something, but Mabel decided not to ask anything for now. The girl was about to leave. However, her husband asked her to wait. He took his wife's hand. It was a very warm and gentle touch. The guy looked at her with loving eyes, as if he wanted to say something. But he was silent. He kissed her forehead, so affectionately, like a child. It was a very gentle kiss. After him, the girl could not say anything. She was impressed by her husband's affection, and he wished her a good day. And since she didn't like his appearance this morning, he promised not to do that again, until she herself asks for it first. But Mabel still believed that this would never happen. Her words left an unpleasant aftertaste in the guy's heart. He began to doubt whether he would ever achieve reciprocity from his wife. So the days passed. They met again in the dining room when it was time for lunch. The table, as always, was generously set. The variety of dishes continued to amaze Mabel and Patrick, but the Duke was used to this. Suddenly, the child sighed sadly. After that, his mother reprimanded him. She said it was rude to sigh like that in front of adults. But the guy realized that something was wrong with his son and decided to find out what was bothering his son. The boy decided to tell him what he was worried about. He said that it was quite difficult for him to live in this palace, and he found it very difficult to study, but his father knew this would happen. After all, he heard that the boy studied hard and memorized quickly, which means the kid tried very hard. But still, The Duke suggested talking to Miss Mercy so that she could explain more slowly. However, there was more to it than that. Patrick understood that he had to study no matter what. He didn't want to disappoint Mom and Dad. This behavior was admirable. The father assured the child that if he did not study well, they would not be disappointed in him anyway. Therefore, the boy should not overload himself. And for sure, Patrick had some wishes regarding his studies. The father was ready to listen to his son. The child looked at his mother. In a timid voice, he said that it would be great to play with Mom all day. And so at least once a week. Lately, the girl had been so busy that she couldn't play with him. Therefore, she agreed with her son's remark, and tomorrow could be set aside for games. However, the teacher promised to tell the boy something very interesting tomorrow. Therefore, the child needed to make an adult decision. He needed to choose a day when he would not be so busy. 6 days later, Patrick finished studying the current lesson. And then you can set aside a whole day for games. Although it seemed long, the mother was willing to wait. But Mabel immediately remembered that she had a trip planned for that day. So she will be busy. The girl suggested that her son choose the 7th day for games. The child, with horror in his eyes, asked where his mother was going to go. It seems that the Duke was not aware of this either. His eyes were full of surprise. The Duchess told her son that she was going to go to the palace. The boy became very interested, and he asked to go with his mother. But this meeting was only for mothers. Therefore, she could not take her son with her. Demore had not previously heard anything about this meeting and expected to receive an explanation from his wife. After lunch, the girl, as always, walked in the park. Her husband approached her and asked if she was invited to the royal tea party. The Duke had a very dissatisfied look. He really didn't like this idea. He believed that his wife should not have gone there. However, Mabel objected. After all, her husband had previously said that she could freely participate in public events. And so it was. But events associated with Her Majesty were not included in this list. The guy had a bad feeling about this. The Duchess asked why her meeting with the Queen was a problem for her husband. He replied that he didn't want her to bother them. But this reason did not seem significant to the girl. She clarified whether there were other reasons. In any case, it was no longer possible to refuse Her Majesty's invitation. If a girl does this, the ruler will be less favorable to her. So all she can do is agree on everything. The guy said that his wife shouldn't pay attention to such things. But Mabel was surprised by these words. Everyone in Cavalon knew about their bad relationship. The girl tried to take at least some measures before unnecessary rumors spread. Moreover, she was worried that this could harm the reputation of not only her family, but also the House of Quinterel. The heroine knew about the status of her husband, and she believed that it would be stupid on her part to act rashly against Her Majesty. The Duchess hoped that her husband understood what was being said. The guy realized that the girl was worried about him. This made him feel happy. But Mabel did not understand the reason for his happiness. She did not see how these words were connected with caring for her husband. So the brunette explained. He was pleased that his wife was worried about his reputation. The heroine said that worrying about her husband was no more than worrying about her family. And she assured that these words did not mean at all that she loved him. He was simply Patrick's father. The Duke understood that the girl would not worry about those who were indifferent to her. Therefore, hope arose within him. Mabel continued to look into her husband's eyes. It was so intense and insistent. It was as if Demore could see right through her. Not only her body, but also her mind obeyed his gaze. He saw her to the subtle corners of her soul, completely and completely. There was nothing to hide from him. It felt like the guy knew everything about her. But the girl said that it was not so. After this, the Duke left, allowing her to do what she wanted. But he asked me not to put too much pressure on myself. After all, he didn't marry to watch Mabel hurt herself. At this time, it was better to rest. The girl sat in the park and thought about his words, and over what feelings he was beginning to evoke in her. She tried to calm down, and she repeated to herself that she was doing this only for Patrick's sake. The behavior of her husband, who was so kind to the child, could not but please the heroine. He was Patrick's father, and that was the only reason she could afford to worry about him. The girl sat immersed in thoughts, not even noticing the beauty of what was around her. The park was surrounded by greenery like an oasis. Tall trees spread their branches, creating cool shade. The cheerful murmur of fountains and the chirping of birds filled the air with the pleasant melody of nature. People walked along the alleys, enjoying the scenery. The girl repeated to herself again and again that she was doing all this for Patrick. The rest was not so important to her. Mabel nevertheless decided to accept the queen's invitation to a tea party. When she arrived at the palace, the beauty congratulated her on her engagement. The empress also said that she would like to attend their wedding. Therefore, it is very regrettable that such an event was not public, and she assumed that the ceremony must have been romantic, and the bride on it was the most beautiful. The heroine entered the room where other girls were already sitting. One of them began to flatter the girl, saying that she looked amazing today. She was also interested to know if her husband treated Mabel well. One of the invited ladies wanted to talk about the past. While the girl was considered missing, the Duke's expression was constantly very cold. Now that she appeared, Demure became so talkative. Everyone understood that the guy was incredibly lonely at that time. After all, even rejecting the queen's proposal for so long was not an easy task. The other lady asked her to stop saying such things. During the cheerful conversation of these ladies, the queen herself entered the room. She was greeted with dignity by the assembled ladies. The ruler, as always, looked unusually beautiful. She invited the girls to sit down at the table. However, while the queen was busy, here they probably remembered her with an unkind word. But those present began to refute this. They said that they had no need to criticize their ruler. Having sat down at the table, the ruler introduced her new guest to the girls. She thanked Lady Quinterelle for joining them after all, and Mabel responded with gratitude for the invitation. The empress reported that she was a little worried. Everyone knew that the new guest was now the wife of the most beautiful and impeccable man in the country. While enjoying her new life, the girl might not have found time to come. But still, the queen was glad that she was wrong about this. The blonde felt how these words of the ruler began to hurt her. They forced her to make excuses. After all, the queen's invitation was considered a great honor, and the girl should be glad to be here. The beauty was very flattered by such words. She took her first sip of tea. It turned out to be very tasty. The queen invited everyone to try it. After this, the conversation turned to the new King Tesla. Mabel heard about him when she visited Royal Vakel. Almost everyone around understood who they were talking about. There were also rumors in the palace that Duchess Menard's health had deteriorated. Therefore, she intended to leave the central palace. Surely the loss of such an important person made Her Majesty sad. But since the lady's health came first, it was better to replace her. For example, Lady Vion. And then the ruler will be missing one maid. Thus, a vacancy opened up for this position. Many would be honored to become one of the queen's closest aides. This was the only way to gain power without relying on social status or your husband. There were many people in the hall. A dispute began among the girls about who would get this place. Almost everyone tried to raise their hand higher than others so that the queen could see it. One of the girls decided to find out if the ruler had any wishes in this regard. And she had them, as always. The Duchess of Quinterelle was offered the position of first maid and assistant to the queen. For the girl herself, this came as a surprise. After all, she didn't even participate in the dispute about who would get this place. Without her, there were already a lot of people willing. Queen Mabel's insistent gaze made her feel uneasy. The girl apologized and said that it was quite unexpected for her. But the Empress insisted on her proposal. She recalled that the girl is now the mistress of the Quinterelle house. This meant that this place, without a doubt, had to be hers. Since Mabel was still young, she could be with the queen for a long time. This was a valuable opportunity that could not be missed. This coveted position is sought after and envied. The beauty did not want to accept refusal. However, the girl was not ready to agree either. She said it was a great honor for her, for which she was grateful. But there was a lady whom she considered much better than herself. Since she was young, she did not yet have enough skills and knowledge, and it is unlikely that a person like her would be suitable for such a responsible position. The queen continued by pointing out that Mabel was older than her. This means that the ruler herself, according to the girl, is unworthy to occupy her position. But the blonde said that she would never dare compare the queen with a commoner like herself. It was quite a prestigious place, and now she was given a chance. Being too modest was also considered bad. Otherwise, it could be perceived as a mockery of the ruler. The queen's words made Mabel more and more upset. It seemed that with every word, the queen's company became more and more unpleasant. The empress continued the conversation. She said that she looked funny since her interlocutor managed to marry a man who rejected the queen herself. No one in the hall then wanted to be in the girl's place. Everyone understood that the heroine had fallen out of favor with the beauty. Mabel tried to justify herself, saying that she never thought such a thing. But this did not mean that there were no reasons to refuse the queen. The rejected beauty said that newcomers always have a hard time. Her late mother said that Duchess Menard couldn't cope at first either, but since the girl the queen chose is smart, she will cope with this task. The queen also suggested giving Mabel more time to think. A lot of thoughts arose in the girl's head. She didn't know what to do correctly in this situation. If the heroine refuses, it will only be a matter of time before rumors spread about her disrespect for the queen. You can no longer use your husband and child as excuses. If the girl spoke incorrectly, her situation would worsen even more. Leaving the table, Mabel bowed to the queen and said that she had many shortcomings. But if the ruler wants this, then she will obey her order, and he will take care of her with all his heart. The beauty was glad that she had achieved her goal. She said the girl did the right thing. An awkward silence hung in the air, as if time had stopped. The ladies looked at each other awkwardly, not knowing how to react to what was happening. The fear of judgment tormented their souls, making them feel uncomfortable. At this moment, everyone wanted not to witness this situation. The girls, who had recently been arguing for the place of the maid, were numb with horror. The queen's behavior was shocking. They had never seen a ruler humiliate anyone like that. Fear gripped their hearts because no one knew who the queen's wrath might fall on. Mabel felt humiliated and insulted. She did not understand why she had to endure such treatment. Some time has passed since the tea party. Mabel told her husband about the queen's proposal. The duke was quite surprised and did not want his wife to become a servant. The girl apologized to him for making the decision herself. Indeed, it was better to discuss such issues together. However, an oppressive atmosphere reigned at that event, and the heroine simply had no choice. She felt bad when the queen got angry and accused her of avoiding her. The girl was very upset because of this. Mabel said that Her Majesty asked if she was laughing at her because of her marriage. The duke knew that the queen often behaved this way with people. First, she confuses them, and then she takes away what she so desired. He understood that his wife really had no choice, because the empress was a very unpleasant person. Mabel was surprised that her husband did not say a good word about the ruler during the conversation. She asked if this is really true or if he only says that when they are together. And the duke replied that he really didn't like the queen. As a ruler, she is ideal, but as a person, she is not. Free and arrogant personality, the same as other rulers. Therefore, these issues can only be discussed with his wife. He tries not to start this conversation in front of other people. Next to his wife, the hero promised to always tell the truth. Only with her. Because in the presence of his wife, he can feel free. If he had said such a thing in another place, he would have been executed for insulting the queen. This made the girl laugh. The hero did not understand the reason for the laughter, but he was pleased to see his beloved smile. After these words, Mabel stopped smiling, and the guy asked the reason. He considered this behavior impolite, but the girl began to make excuses, saying that she had not smiled before, and that she doesn't understand what her husband is talking about. However, the heroine assumed that the guy would consider Her Majesty a good person. It doesn't matter whether it's a simple woman or not. Mabel admitted that after her disappearance, she thought that the duke would marry the queen. And he assured her that this would never happen. He was saddened to hear that his beloved thought so of him. After all, the guy couldn't marry someone else immediately after her disappearance. It would be unmanly, and the duke did not consider himself one. But Mabel added that the queen was just a woman, albeit the noblest lady in Freeman, and you can fall in love with her too. This proposal sounded plausible. Anyone who looks at the queen will agree that it is better to become a prince than to wait for a missing groom, which moreover may be dead. However, the duke believed that such people were certainly devoid of loyalty and honor. These words even offended him a little. He never wanted to be such a person and did not understand why his beloved said that. So the guy asked his wife what she would do in his place. Would she abandon her fiancé who suddenly disappeared and then become a royal concubine? But Mabel replied that she would never do that. And probably for the same reason as the duke. After all, it doesn't matter to him that the queen was the most noble girl in Freeman, or that she has absolute power. All that mattered to him was how much he loved this person. He never desired a prominent position and never let the empress into his heart. The duke said that he answered the queen over and over again. The guy said that even if she asks 100 or 1,000 times, his answer will be the same. Therefore, he asked his wife not to think of him as a bad person. Mabel saw the sincerity in his eyes and knew that he was not lying. After this, he asked what else had happened between her and Her Majesty. But she replied that she just asked these questions by chance. There is no reason here. The Duke did not believe her. He knew very well the Queen's cunning and her way of talking with other people. The girls suggested ending the conversation. That was enough for today. After all, tomorrow she had to play Patrick. And for this it was necessary to go to bed early. Mabel summed up the conversation. She said that if the Duchess became the Queen's chief assistant, she herself would have to work in the main palace. The girl really didn't like this idea. However, nothing can be done about it. What is done is done. Now I had to put my desires aside. All that was left was to try as hard as possible. The guy decided to support his beloved and said that she would cope. He also asked if the girl would allow him to see her more often. But she replied that it was unlikely that it would work out. The palace was huge and she would have a lot of work. The Duke was ready to find her a new job. The difficulty was that Her Majesty saw them as a problem. So it's unlikely to be a good idea. And if the hero resists Mabel's will, then only she will suffer from this. The guy thought about these words. He thought that his wife was worried about him, and he considered this to be the main reason that while going to the tea party, his beloved agreed to work. All this was not only for the sake of others, but also for his sake. It seemed that the Duke knew everything the girl was thinking about, but she preferred to make decisions herself and had the right to do so. However, one thing was clear. His wife now urgently needed rest, since the day had turned out to be difficult. And she didn't argue with that. After finishing the conversation, Mabel went to her room. But along the way she reflected on what she had heard. The girl could not understand how this happened. Her husband never seemed to blink during the conversation. He also made it clear that he would not become Her Majesty's prince. Everyone around said that the guy was waiting only for her all the time. And this seems to be true. The heroine realized that everything she had previously believed in could turn out to be a lie. Now we had to figure out what to do next. Arriving in the room, the girl went to bed, but the dream had already disappeared. The feeling of anxiety did not leave her. The blonde tossed and turned from side to side, listening to every rustle. Suddenly, through her drowsiness, a knock came to her. At first quiet, barely perceptible, it gradually intensified, disturbing the serenity of the night. Mabel couldn't figure out who was knocking at this late hour. Opening the doors of the room, she saw her frightened son. He cried and asked to be held by his mother. The child looked for protection in his mother. When the girl took him, she hugged him tightly and decided to find out what happened. Why the child was crying. The boy looked at his mother, seeking comfort. The heroine repeated the question to find out what happened to the child and who offended him. But the kid said he saw a monster. He was chasing him, that's why the boy was so scared. The girl asked which monster her son meant. Perhaps the baby just had a dream. And he confirmed this. The young mother was surprised that she did not immediately understand what her son was talking about. She hugged the child again. The kid began to say that he was afraid that he would never see his mother again. After all, the monster had very large teeth. The girl realized that her son must have been very scared. But now he was safe, since they were now close. The kid understood that his mother would defeat any monsters, and he can trust her. Then the child asked to sleep with his parents today. His mom always sleeps with his dad, so she's not afraid of anything. The baby also wanted to be with his parents that night, but his father was not in the room. At that moment, the nanny came into the girl's room. She said that the young master suddenly ran away. She should have watched him more closely so as not to disturb his owners. But Mabel reassured the nanny, saying that everything was fine. And the Duke is not in this room because he has not finished his work yet. He worries about his wife not going to bed too late. Because of this, the heroine had to sleep alone today. The boy accepted his mother's words as truth, but still he wanted to see his father. The kid suggested going to Dad and asking if he had finished his work. After all, he won't be scared at all if they fall asleep together. And the child ran out of the room. Neither his mother nor his nanny could hold him. The kid ran through all the corridors of the castle and reached his father's room. He started knocking on the door with all his might. His mother tried to calm him down. She said that there was no need to bother Dad, because he was busy right now. But the door of the chambers opened and the Duke came out to meet. He saw his wife and son standing outside his room in the middle of the night. The hero was glad to see them and asked what brought them to him. The boy immediately replied that he missed his father very much. The hero was pleased to hear this. After all, he also missed his son. The child said that he was told that his dad was still busy, but he replied that he had just recently been released. After this, the baby asked to sleep with his parents, because he is scared alone. He dreamed of a monster, and the child wanted his dad to protect him. The father agreed. He told the baby that his dad was strong and was not afraid of monsters or anything else. The boy was delighted, and Mabel, standing in the room, did not know what to do now. The baby happily told his mother that since Dad was already free, they could go to bed together. The guy invited his wife to go into the room and get ready for bed. Holding his son in his arms, he decided to show him the room. My father said that they spend the night here together. And at that moment, the girl was standing on the threshold, because she was put in a very awkward position. She didn't want to cross the line, but it seemed like there was no way out. The guy carried his son to the bed. It was very spacious and soft. The child began to jump on it, but the father asked not to do this. Mabel had no choice but to approach her husband and son. The boy asked his parents why he couldn't always sleep with them. Not knowing how to answer, the heroes looked at each other. No one dared to take responsibility for the explanation. They believed that the boy was still too young to know the intricacies of family life. Not wanting to explain herself, the heroine asked her son to close his eyes. The child said that he really likes to sleep with his parents like this, but they told him that they couldn't do this all the time. The girl asked her son who told him this. It was the nanny. But when the baby asked her why, she did not answer. And Miss Bonnie didn't answer either. The father who entered the conversation told his son that he knew the reason for this. The boy was very interested in listening to him, and Mabel was scared at that moment, worried that her husband would start talking in detail about family life, something that was too early for a child to know. Moore said that parents should sleep together for the baby to be born. This explanation intrigued the boy very much, but if someone else sleeps with mom and dad, then nothing will work out. That's why they don't let anyone into the room at night, and they don't just sleep together. In order for the baby to appear in the mother's tummy, they need to hold hands tightly. While telling this, the Duke managed to smile. The girl felt extremely awkward. She was very embarrassed to talk about such things. Therefore, I decided to turn around so as not to look at either my husband or my son. The child asked if his mother already had his brother or sister in her tummy. The father smiled and said that not yet. The boy began to wonder why this was so. It turns out that the baby does not appear after 1 or 2 nights. In addition, Patrick's mom complains that holding Dad's hand all night is inconvenient. Because of this, they don't have a baby yet. The baby asked his mother to turn around and take his father's hand. To this, she replied that it was better not to rush, since now her son was in their room. However, the child began to tell me that he really wanted a brother or sister. This story surprised the girl very much. The kid explained that he had no friends and his parents were constantly busy, so he felt very lonely. If he has a sister or brother, he can read fairy tales to them. The Duke told his wife that they had no choice. This was Patrick's wish. Their gazes met, and at that moment a spark of love flared up between them again. They extended their hands to each other, feeling the former warmth and excitement. Their fingers touched. A light touch pierced both of them. At that moment, the world around them seemed to freeze. It seemed like only the two of them existed. Mabel's and Damour's eyes met. A whole range of feelings was visible in their glances. Love, tenderness, passion, gratitude, trust. Words were of no use here. They said everything to each other without words, with just a glance and a touch. Their hearts beat in unison. Every beat of their hearts sounded in unison. They couldn't get enough of each other. At that moment, they were one. Their souls merged together, and no force in the world could separate them. They knew that their love was an eternal miracle, a miracle that will live no matter what. And they carefully kept this miracle in their hearts. Time began to flow again as usual, but this moment remained forever in their memory. After some time, their son fell asleep. After that, the girl wanted to go to her room, but the guy said that if Patrick wakes up and doesn't see his mother nearby, he will be very surprised. The girl realized that it was really better for her to stay here until the morning. Mabel looked at her husband but could not sleep. Seeing this face again, she became not herself. The heroine understood that she had to remain attentive, and it was important for her to remember what happened before. After all, she knew very well how much she could lose. The girl remembered how, after she was attacked 5 years ago, she came to her groom's house. The Duke's sister met her and began to ask her about what had happened, and she asked Lawrence to bring tea and a towel. The servant immediately went to do this, and Margot remained with the heroine. The guest told the brunette that everything was fine, but she didn't believe her. The hostess asked if the girl wanted to meet her brother. After all, he unfortunately was not at home now, like their parents. However, they will be there soon. And Margot asked Mabel to wait in the living room. She also decided to find out from the guest whether it was true that she was leaving the city to visit her friends. But the blonde was still unable to continue the conversation. And she said that she would definitely tell everything, but only after everything gets better. Then Margot said that she heard something but did not explain what exactly. She called it thinking out loud. The hostess wanted to give something to Mabel and asked the girl to wait until she brought it, and she couldn't understand what was happening. The girl tried not to trust the killer's words, so she ran here. But what she heard amazed her. The heroine tried to understand why she upset her fiancé. And why did he want to kill her? Many questions remained unanswered. Surely it would be wiser to come home first and only then hear. After all, this situation seemed stupid. However, when the girl was about to leave, she heard the maids talking. They said that Mabel looked terrible. Perhaps the reason for this is a broken engagement. The girl couldn't believe it because the groom hadn't told her anything like that. The maids were discussing the overheard conversation between the Duke and Mr. Percival. He said that it would be better for the family if their son married the princess, and then he will become prince consort. But he is already engaged and the bride is unlikely to let him go. However, Mr. Percival said that everything had already been planned. Therefore, it is quite possible that the engagement of the Duke and his bride has already been broken off. Even after the words of love that he spoke to her, the girl again recalled the events that she had to endure. She understood that most likely the groom was really going to kill her. The first rays of the rising sun timidly broke through the cracks in the curtains, and they painted the room in soft peach tones. The sleepy silence was broken by the melodious singing of a bird. Her ringing voice, like a greeting to a new day, rang in the air and filled the room with warm light and joy. The bird fluttered on a tree branch outside the window and chirped incessantly, as if sharing its happiness with everyone. Her song was so pure and beautiful that it involuntarily made even the most gloomy person smile. She gave hope and faith that something good was ahead. The sun's rays were breaking through the curtains more and more like golden threads. Shadows from furniture and interior items dancing on the walls came to life to the accompaniment of birdsong. The room had an atmosphere of comfort and tranquility. The air was filled with the aroma of freshness, as if spring had just been let into it. On the bed, wrapped in a soft blanket, the girl lay motionless. Her face was clouded with a shadow of anxiety. She had just woken up from a nightmare that left a heavy aftertaste in her soul. The heroine turned around in bed, trying to find a comfortable position, but sleep did not want to go away. There were heavy thoughts in her head. The feeling of fear and anxiety that the dream left behind was truly real. The girl sighed and, decisively throwing off the blanket, got out of bed. The dreamy vision of the attempt on her life still tormented the girl's soul. She was relieved to realize that it was just a nightmare. The heroine was surprised that her husband held her hand all night and slept next to her. The girl was surprised to notice that the Duke held her hand tightly even in his sleep. He slept peacefully next to him, his face calm and peaceful. Waking up, the Duke looked at Mabel tenderly and wished her good morning. His voice was gentle and caring. The blonde asked to let her go. However, the Duke said that he doubted that his son would like her absence in the morning. But they were together all night anyway. The girl asked to let go of her hand as it was already numb, but the guy asked to wait until their son woke up. Mabel asked her husband if it was time for him to go to the palace, and she was right. With a sharp movement, the girl was finally able to take her hand and break free from the embrace. She also asked that the Duke not do this again. The heroine understood that her husband was trying to be kind to his son, but she herself did not want to be a burden. And I didn't want to tire him. But he replied that during these 5 years it was very difficult for him, and caring for his beloved was not at all a burden for him. At these words, Mabel began to bite her lips again. Damore noticed this immediately. He had previously asked her not to do that. Because of this, her lips were bleeding. It seemed that the girl was doing this on purpose so that her husband would worry about her. But she couldn't admit it to herself, and, in order not to answer anything, she simply left the room. The hero's heart squeezed in his chest like a vice. A whirlwind of questions flashed through my head. The feeling of anxiety and fear grew with every second. Misunderstanding and confusion constrained his movements. The only thing he could do was look after her and wonder what was happening. The girl's heart was pounding in her chest like a bird in a cage. On the one hand, she wanted to tell her husband about her torment, to share her worries. On the other hand, I was afraid of his reaction. And she was afraid to find out that it was he who could be the cause of her fears about the past. At this moment, the blonde felt lonely and defenseless, and she understood that she had to find out about everything herself. She was afraid to forget the past, even because of her husband's concern for her. The girl thought that it could cost her life. However, the heroine was haunted by the question of why the Duke refused to become a prince and the Queen's husband. If he himself was not interested in this proposal, then why the servants were discussing it remained unknown. So Mabel decided to find out the whole truth. On her first day, those maids were not in this house. It would be great if she knew where they were. But if you carelessly ask everyone about these maids, then his lordship will immediately find out about it. There is only one option left: to find a connection between the killer and the customer. Although 5 years had passed, the Duke preferred to keep his notes, and you can probably find them somewhere in his office. That's why the girl headed there. She expected to find in the records instructions for the killer, or a book with the amounts of payments, or something related to this. And if there is not even one piece of evidence, perhaps something else should be done. At that moment, the doors to the office opened and 2 maids entered. They were discussing how someone apologized to someone else, and who was wrong in that case. Mabel understood that as the mistress of the mansion, she could clean the house. But after breakfast, the servants came to clean up, so she had practically no time left. Starting next week, she will have to go to the palace. Therefore, we need to find at least some clue. After all, there is no time at all. The girl decided to spend the remaining days searching for evidence. But I didn't find anything. On the one hand, you can come to terms with this because 5 years have already passed. But on the other hand, the girl understood that she could be wrong. Well, or the evidence could be elsewhere. However, if she is noticed, she is unlikely to be able to find an excuse. Deciding to make one last attempt, she began to look for something in books. One of them seemed older to the girl than the others. This was the General National Calendar. The record stated that the events took place on October 23, 910. The diarist met an extraordinary woman at a ball, and the entry for the 31st of December was written with the name of this woman, Mabel Larabi. Since this is a common national calendar, it is probably someone's diary. Therefore, these records could be in it. It seems that she has found what the girl has been looking for so long. But at that moment, the office door opened. The heroine was unusually frightened, because she believed that they would figure her out. The servants came in. They said that they were just expecting to see the hostess here, and if she was not busy, she could approach Lorenz, who was looking for her. The girl didn't know what to do next. After all, she didn't have time to look at the next page, and tomorrow she needs to go to the palace. Because of this, she will no longer be able to come here. It is unlikely that you will be able to take the book with you, otherwise his lordship will notice it. As a result, Mabel decided that next time she would come to finish reading the book, but for now she would put it in the corner. It will definitely be safer this way. In a slightly trembling voice, the girl said that she would now go to Lorenz. She clearly remembered where she put the book so she could find it next time. Now the heroine knew what to look for, and the blonde was looking forward to this. The next morning, Mabel went to the palace. The queen's chief maid met her. Her name was Duchess Vian. The girl thanked her and praised her for this, and she congratulated the woman on her new position. A lot of time has passed since their last meeting. The queen's chief assistant believed that this was the girl's first time here. She also said that there are a lot of rumors after the girl's return. But Duchess Vian considers them a lie, and she asked Mabel not to pay attention to them and fight to the end. The girl was grateful to her new friend for her support. The woman was interested to know why Her Majesty decided to take the heroine as a personal assistant, but she herself didn't know the answer. Vian further asked Mabel to do everything possible to become a worthy assistant to the queen. Then she won't have any problems. And also don't pay attention to other ladies. The girl realized that this was really good advice and decided that she would do so. After that, the Duchess went to introduce the new girl to the other assistants. Entering the room where they were, the woman showed the assistant's desk. She used to use it herself. According to custom, this place is occupied by the chief assistant. It is a great honor to receive this position, but on the other hand, it's just furniture. And so Mabel became Her Majesty's assistant. It was so unexpected. Now she was ready to say goodbye to all formalities and talk about a well-deserved rest. But there was a lot of work to be done before that. Because of the upcoming ball, Her Majesty's assistants had difficult tasks. They were going through a difficult time. The sudden resignation of the previous assistant in the midst of preparations completely threw them off. Therefore, everyone counted on Mabel's help. The girl seemed to understand why she was here. She was entrusted with organizing catering, and most importantly, her duty will be to supervise the maids. In case of any doubt, the heroine could always count on help. At that moment, Her Majesty the Queen arrived. All the maids worshipped her. They greeted the great son of the Freeman Empire, but the queen said that there should be no formalities between them, and she asked the servants to raise their heads. The empress said that she had come to greet their new assistant. She was glad that the girl agreed to come. Mabel replied that she was honored to meet the ruler again. Despite her shortcomings, the blonde was willing to do whatever she could. The beauty replied that she was confident in her choice of assistant, and she hopes that she can handle it. Today, the girl's role was to accompany the queen. Now the weather is wonderful and the ruler wanted to take a walk. The girls went to the park where it was very warm. Pleasant air and warm splashes of water from the fountains gave a feeling of vigor. At first, the conversation didn't go well, but later the empress still tried to start it. She said that it was very nice outside, despite the slight chill. Mabel agreed with this, but for some reason she looked sad. Surely we should have expected some kind of dirty tricks from the ruler. The girl added that the way the queen devotes herself to state affairs is admirable. However, it is better to go out into the fresh air more often. This is important in order to be healthy. The queen noted that the heroine only became her assistant today, and already speaks like an experienced one. Mabel apologized for being too concerned, but the empress did not invite her here to find fault with little things. She wanted to tell her how surprised she was at how much marriage had changed the girl, and securing child custody, of course, was delayed. The beauty also asked why her interlocutor had previously said that she did not want to marry the duke. However, in the end, she decided to get married. The blonde replied that she had just made a decision on which the fate of her son depended. Mabel hoped that the queen did not make her an assistant to ask about her life, but apparently this was not the case. The ruler said that in any case the interlocutor refused her offer, and she became the wife of the duke. She went on to express the hope that he was taking good care of his wife, and also that Damer is gentle with her and her son. The girl replied that they just lived together, and at that moment she heard a familiar voice calling her name. It seemed like this couldn't happen. The duke himself entered the park. He told his wife that he saw her from afar. Mabel was very embarrassed by her husband's behavior. She would rather he didn't notice her. With desperate gestures, the girl showed that it was better for the guy to leave, but the husband still approached them and greeted the ruler. It seemed to the heroine that he didn't care about his feelings, since he put her in such an awkward situation. The guy said he still couldn't believe the queen went for a walk. However, the ruler replied that today was the duchess's first day in the palace, so I decided to invite her to take a walk. Take a walk with the duke's wife herself. The brunette apologized to the queen for disturbing him. The empress said that she wanted to find out something from her interlocutor, but she seems shy to answer. Therefore, the beauty asked this question to the duke himself, and she asked if he liked married life. The girl was surprised by the queen's behavior. It seemed indecent to her to ask other people about this. But the guy agreed. He said that he was very happy with this life. I'm so glad that I even feel a certain poignancy in it, and this makes him happy. The duke wished the queen to experience the same emotions when she could find a suitable gentleman for herself. But the beauty continued this strange conversation. For some reason, she said that she was worried about the guy. After all, I heard that a child could become an obstacle to their wedding. The brunette replied that he had everything sorted out, and all thanks to the fact that his son is charming and well-mannered. But the most important thing is his love for his wife and son. The queen said she watched this. From the outside, the heroes looked like an ideal family, and such families usually cause envy. The ruler further said that it was time for her and Mabel to return. She thanked the duke for the pleasant conversation. Unexpectedly, the guy asked Her Majesty for one favor. It might be rude of him, but he asked permission to talk to his wife. He wanted to talk to her in the morning, but she was sleeping so soundly that he didn't want to disturb her. The queen gave permission for this. After all, her assistant has the right to do what she wants. And the hero took his wife away from walking with the queen. Mabel couldn't understand what was going on and waited for her husband to say something. But he took her further and further away from the annoying interlocutor, who stood and looked at them. Entering the palace, the duke asked to bring him 2 cups of tea, with mint flavor. The tea that I recently received as a gift. The heroes entered the office. The girl tried to understand what it all meant. Timur said he wanted to show his wife his office. He inherited it from his father. Mabel was here for the first time, but she was more interested in why the duke was saying such things to Her Majesty. It wasn't necessary to answer like that. The guy didn't agree with this. He was surprised that his wife did not discuss the queen. After all, the hero told the empress 1,000 times that he was not going to become a prince consort. Besides, the duke is now married. But even in front of the Duke's wife, the ruler bothered to mention her desire to marry him. From the very beginning, everyone knew that this would happen. However, this did not mean that Her Majesty was allowed to behave this way. She clearly went too far with them. Still, it wouldn't do any good for the heroes to continue to anger the queen. The girl asked her husband to control himself. But he did not see the need for this. After all, the ruler made him unusually angry. Because of her, the hero had to endure all these inconveniences. He wanted to end this as quickly as possible and protect his wife. Mabel was extremely pleased to hear words of concern. However, she asked him to stop annoying Her Majesty. After all, she didn't like this behavior of his. However, the guy still did not agree with this. In the eyes of his wife, he was a child, not an adult and intelligent person. The girl did not want to tolerate this. In such situations, it is enough to simply walk away and politely say goodbye. But the fact that the queen occupies such a position does not give her the right to disrespect the House of Dukes. Timur asked his wife not to worry. After all, he would not allow her and Patrick to be hurt. The heroine told the Duke that he could do whatever he saw fit, and it's time for her to go. By that time, the tea had not yet been brought. Therefore, the hero asked his wife to stay and drink tea with him before leaving, but she did not agree. Still, it was strange to her why her husband wanted to spend time with her so much. To this, the guy replied that his wife is an excellent conversationalist. He asked her to stay again. The girl decided that so be it, she would listen to her husband, and he shouldn't beg her about it. A boy, still very young, entered the room. However, he was already serving in the queen's palace. The teenager brought mint tea and chocolate chip cookies. And if anything else was needed, he asked me to let you know. Mabel noted that this servant was still quite a youth, to which the Duke added that this was a page. Recently, he began to delve into the work, and when Patrick grows up, he will become the same. It's not for nothing that they say that children grow up too fast. Even without the presence of their parents, they still grow. The guy further added that the mere thought that in a year he would no longer be able to see his son made him very sad, and he doesn't know what to do if Patrick suddenly forgets his father. What if his son decides that he is no longer his father if you don't tell him where children come from? The girl replied that this would definitely not happen. Their son is not that kind of child. However, no one knows what he really is like better than himself. The blonde said that after the divorce, the husband can continue to see his son. Although they will have to end their marriage, the fact that Daymore is the father of the child will not change. The heroine still didn't know whether this was a good idea or not. The Duke decided to clarify how often he could visit the boy. Mabel replied that she would not put any restrictions on this. When he wants to see each other, then he can. And if the child wants, then she herself can bring him to his father. The guy was sad to think about this now. He was afraid that he would not be able to bear their separation from his son. This will be especially difficult after so many joyful days spent together. In the meantime, their task is to create these joyful days. For example, next weekend you can have a picnic. The three of us, together with Patrick, and away from the city. The weather has been wonderful outside the last few days. Before this, the girl decided to ask her son for consent. The Duke said that he would definitely agree. After all, it will be a picnic with Mom and Dad. After these words, Mabel agreed. And now it was time to return to the Queen. When she returned, the girl apologized for her absence. But the ruler immediately realized that they were drinking mint tea. After all, a wonderful aroma emanated from the girl. The beauty thought that it could only be mint. And she was right. The blonde said that over a cup of tea, she and her husband discussed pressing family issues. The Empress continued and said that she knew about the heroine's responsibility to organize catering for the palace ball. Therefore, she must be very busy now and can get down to her business. The girl thanked her interlocutor and went to work. The Empress sat very dissatisfied. The minty smell in the room haunted her. Most recently, it was she who gave the Duke this tea. And then she said that these leaves were from abroad. Not everyone can try this tea. And the hero deliberately drank it with his wife. The Queen sadly imagined what a victorious look the guy might have now. This made it difficult for her to control herself when talking to Mabel. The past few days have been very hectic in the palace. And so the blonde returned to where she really wanted, to a place that had become extremely unusual for her. Upon entering, the servant greeted her and called her Lady Mabel. He later apologized because the girl was no longer Lady Mabel. It was a servant of the Roby estate. The girl should now be addressed as Duchess de Quintarel. She arrived with her son. She asked those around her to contact her the same way as before. In this house, it is unlikely that she will be able to respond to her current name. But the servant couldn't do that. He, like the girl, still had to get used to this name. At these words, her brother came down to the Duchess. He walked out with Chris. Both were glad to see the guest. The owners greeted the girl with warm hugs. They wanted to know if the girl was okay and how she was doing. It seemed like an eternity had passed since their last meeting. But Mabel didn't think so. The blonde said that she was fine and there was no need to worry about her. Patrick, entering the room, called out to his uncle with a joyful exclamation. The blonde was pleased to see his nephew as well. After all, they all missed each other. Marcus said he was sad when the child left, but now he won't be sad. The boy suggested that his mother visit his aunt and uncle more often. After all, he missed them too. The owner of the house invited the guests to come inside. Their younger sister was not home yet. She was invited to a tea party. Marie said that she would try to return when her sister arrived, but she was still not there. She was at the Jellerus estate. Margot went there too. Those present suggested that the young girls might already know each other. Many ladies are invited to this event. The Marquis suggested postponing this topic, which was interesting to everyone, for later. Now go have dinner. After all, it is now evening. The sun sank lower and lower towards the horizon, painting the sky in delicate shades. With its warm rays, it gently filled the rooms with amber light. At this moment, you understand that even the most ordinary things and pictures can be beautiful. You just need to be able to see and appreciate them. During dinner, the guy asked his sister if it was true that she had become an assistant to the queen herself. She confirmed this, and he has been working in the royal palace for several days. The girl there was very tired. After the first day of work, I lay down on the sofa and immediately fell asleep. The brother was worried that the blonde might overwork. After all, she has a weak physique. At that moment, Lady Marie, who was late, entered the room. She immediately asked whether she had time to catch her sister or not. The tea party turned out to be longer than she expected. The Marquis said that they had just had dinner and were finally going to sit together. And little Patrick joyfully ran towards his aunt. Before that, he was just expounding something. Marie asked what exactly the baby wanted to tell. The boy replied that he, Mom, and Dad were going to a picnic tomorrow, and this caused great happiness in the child. After all, a picnic with your family is a very pleasant event. But Lady Margaret refused to go with them. The guy was glad to hear that his sister was getting along with her husband. After all, everyone was very worried about this. Christina decided to keep the conversation going. She said she almost forgot something. But for this, it was necessary for Patrick to go up to the second floor with her. There was a gift for the boy. The child loved gifts very much, so he was happy about this offer. Before leaving, Chris whispered to her brother to ask her sister a certain question. When the heroes went to the second floor and the doors closed behind them, the Marquis began to select words for this conversation. He understood that his sister did not marry the Duke of her own free will, so the blonde couldn't help but worry about her. The guy decided to find out if his sister still wants to divorce her husband in a year. However, she did not know the answer. The girl understood that her family wished her a happy life as a duchess. Moreover, her son seems to have become closer to his father. He was very happy when he talked about the picnic, and it was impossible not to notice. The heroine has not seen her son so happy for a long time. He finally met his father, whom he can trust and love. Mabel was worried that if she spoke about the divorce, it would be very painful for Patrick. Just this thought alone broke the girl's heart. The Marquis understood his sister's condition, and he understood the feelings that worried her. Indeed, the child's opinion and feelings are important, but Mabel's own feelings are also important. The brother didn't know what his sister went through, but if everyone around her treats her well, then why not stay? Now we need to find out only one question: whether the Duke is worthy of this. The look on the girl's face said that he was taking good care of her. Although she is embarrassed to talk about this, the heroine still didn't know if it mattered. For now, she is only sure of his sincerity. The blonde asked his sister not to rush to make unfair judgments. After all, as soon as she starts spending more time with her husband, her answer will become more accurate. Therefore, you shouldn't worry so much about it now. The girl said that she would do so. At this time, the heroine remembered the book that she found in her husband's office. In it, she wanted to find the answer to what to do next, but the blonde had a bad feeling about this idea. The next morning came. Today should be the long-awaited picnic. The boy pulled his mother's hand outside. The weather was simply wonderful. It was perfect for relaxation. The child noted that even the sky shows respect for their holiday. The girl was surprised that her son was able to learn this word. Miss Bonnie taught him that. The heroine asked the kid his opinion about what respect is. The child replied that respect is when a person thinks about others before doing something. It's like he's lending a helping hand, or covers mom when she sleeps. Mabel thought it was Patrick. After the first day of work, the heroine fell asleep on the sofa as soon as she lay down. And someone covered her with a blanket. However, the baby said that Dad did it. The child then called his mother, but the father said that there was no need to wake her up and covered her with a blanket. The boy considered such an act to be respectful. The girl replied that her son was right, but earlier she had assumed that this was the act of one of the maids. The Duke approached the conversation. He decided to find out why they were still not in the carriage. The hero asked if his son was ready, because it was time to go. The boy eagerly ran to the carriage, and the Duchess at that moment wanted to find out something from her husband. He thought that he had done something wrong again, but the girl asked if he covered her with a blanket while she was sleeping. The guy replied that he was worried that his wife would catch a cold, so he did this. Mabel thanked him for this. She was pleased that her husband cared so much about her. But the Duke said that this is the most common thing for a married couple. A child sitting in a carriage was hurrying his parents. He asked why they were taking so long to get to the carriage, and he assumed that Dad kissed Mom. The girl embarrassedly said that they did not kiss, but just walked slowly. And the father confirmed to his son that this was so. After all, if it were not true, he would feel dishonest. Mabel's cheeks flushed red. She looked down, nervously fiddling with the hem of her dress. Her heart was beating wildly, and thousands of different thoughts were racing through her head. She didn't know how to react to her son's words, and she felt a little embarrassed in front of her husband. The Duke looked at his wife with tenderness. He saw her embarrassment and could not help but smile. He liked this spontaneity and purity of hers. At this moment, the guy fell even more in love with his Mabel. It was time to go. The heroes were heading to an unusual place. That day the sun shone brightly, filling the lavender field with its warmth. It was to this field that the travelers were heading. A light breeze swayed the flowers, emitting a pleasant aroma. Green hills could be seen in the distance, and birds flew overhead, chirping their songs. Patrick looked out the carriage window with interest, looking at the landscapes passing by. The child was delighted with the beauty of nature, and I was looking forward to coming to the picnic. The kid told his mother that there was a pleasant smell on the field. He didn't even know that such wonderful flowers grew outside the city. They looked simply extraordinary. The girl told her son that it was lavender. It is from her that this wonderful smell comes. The boy tried to remember the name of these flowers. He really liked these plants. Coming out of the carriage, the child began to collect them into a bouquet with his mother. And then Patrick gave her this bouquet as a sign of his love. The heroine was very grateful to her son, but she suggested not to rip them off anymore. She explained that when you pick flowers, they get hurt and die. This upset the boy very much because he didn't want to hurt anyone. It seemed that the child was about to cry, and the father standing nearby realized that something was wrong with his son. The boy told his dad that he had killed the flowers, but the Duchess tried to calm her child down. The guy decided to find out from his son what happened and what caused his upset, and when I realized what was going on, I started laughing. Mabel asked her husband to stop and try to console the child a little. Then the Duke took him in his arms and said that everything was fine. Those flowers that were given to Mom will indeed fade, but new flowers will grow from the remaining stems. The boy asked what would happen to the flowers that he gave to his mother, whether they die or not. The guy replied that this is normal, and when the baby stops crying, he can treat himself to pudding. This made the boy quickly calm down. This behavior also surprised the child's mother. She thought that her son really wanted pudding. Patrick promised not to pick flowers anymore. He wanted them to grow and live. The girl was glad to see such kindness from her son. This means she is raising him well. However, no matter how smart he is only 4 years old. The boy, sitting in his father's arms, had already asked for pudding himself. But my father said that before that you need to eat a hearty meal. Otherwise your tummy will start to hurt. It's time for the heroes to have lunch. And not just because the child wanted pudding. If you look at the clock, it's not that early for lunch. If the child is already hungry, it doesn't matter whether it is early or late. The heroine began to look for a bench or something else where she could have a snack. And the Duke suggested having lunch not on a bench but on a picnic blanket. After all, if they dine on a bench, they will not be able to see each other. Father and son began to choose a place to lay out the blanket. The child showed a small clearing where the heroes decided to settle down. The girl wondered how it was that she constantly followed her husband on his heels. At that moment, her son called her again. The boy wanted to have lunch near a field of flowers. After all, he really liked this smell. Lunch looked incredibly delicious, and the boy clearly liked him. The heroes wished each other bon appetit. A lot of sweets were prepared, but such a lunch could not be called filling. This was the first joint picnic of the heroes, and everyone really enjoyed the holiday. During lunch, the girl looked at her son. The boy asked his mother to turn her head. Having done this, the heroine saw a fork with stabbed food next to her. It was the Duke who tried to feed her. This behavior was unusual for Mabel, so at first she wanted to refuse. Even Patrick doesn't like being fed. Timur decided to check this out. He brought the same fork to his son's mouth, and the boy ate it with pleasure. After this, the Duke said that there was nothing strange about feeding a loved one, and the kid agreed with this. He even invited his mother to feed him too, but she already considered herself an adult. The guy decided to try to feed his wife a second time. This time she gave in and ate. The girl asked if his lordship would eat. The hero replied that he was not particularly hungry. Watching his wife and son eat, his hunger was gradually satisfied. But Mabel thought this was not true and felt like a chick that someone was feeding. However, in fact, my husband really liked this behavior. She was flattered by his concern for her. She understood that he still loved her. Then the heroine continued and said that the real chick was sitting next to them. But for the Duke to feed her was quite natural. The guy brought the fork with food to the girl's lips for the third time. But the girl thought that was enough. After all, in this way they are not setting the best example for their son. The hero replied that it is unlikely that his son takes it so close to his heart. At that moment, Patrick seemed to have found the most delicious dish on the table. And of course he suggested that my mother try it. The blonde really liked it too. Mabel's smile was barely noticeable, but her eyes were shining with happiness. She looked with tenderness at her son, who happily ate the treat, as if this is the first delicacy in his life. My father also watched this picture with emotion, and I felt in my soul boundless love for my family. The table was in disarray. There were empty plates, crumbs of bread, and napkins all around. But this only added to the coziness of this outdoor meal. From this place it was clearly visible how the lavender field spread out, and its delicate aroma filled the air. It was not for nothing that the heroes settled in this clearing with flowers. After lunch, the boy lay down on the blanket and fell asleep. He got up early in anticipation of the picnic, so by lunchtime he was a little tired. His parents decided to give him the opportunity to sleep. Mabel asked why his lordship did not rest too, but he decided to take a walk with his wife. After all, the weather today is simply magnificent. However, the girl tried to refuse the walk. The guy didn't like this behavior. He took the girl by the hand and tried to drag her with him. However, he stopped doing this almost immediately. If Mabel doesn't want to go with him, then let her stay here, and the hero himself will take a walk. The girl realized that she had offended him with her behavior. Therefore, I decided to apologize and keep my husband company. Suddenly, the Duke asked whether his wife preferred to sit or stand. The heroine realized that her husband wanted to draw a picture with her, and she will need to pose. Only now did she remember that he liked drawing. They have nothing else to do while their son is sleeping. The guy said that he would draw the picture quickly and it wouldn't take much time. He likes this activity more than a walk. The girl decided that she would pose standing, because it's hard to sit in one place for a long time. Mabel stood in front of a beautiful lavender field. The tree created shade all around. The guy looked at his wife with emotion, realizing that she was very beautiful. There was a gentle sparkle in his eyes, and a barely noticeable smile played on his lips. He ran his hand through her hair, inhaling its delicate aroma. They flowed over the shoulders like silk, shimmering in the light. The hero noticed a strand that had gotten out of his hair and, unable to restrain himself, straightened it. His touch was so light and gentle that the wife barely felt it. Love, care, and tenderness were visible in his eyes. Timur smiled slightly and leaned down, tickling her cheek and neck with his fingers. From his touch, the girl involuntarily smiled, feeling loved. At that moment, everything around them seemed to freeze. Only the two of them existed in their own little world where love and harmony reigned. At this moment, a pleasant aroma of lavender reached them. The guy felt the smell filling his lungs. The girl was ready to start posing. This made her look even more beautiful. But later she felt uneasy, so the blonde asked her husband to draw her later. Mabel couldn't understand why she was so nervous and acting crazy. Because of this, the picture may lose its meaning. The Duke was worried that he would no longer be able to see his wife like this. Therefore, he still insisted on finishing the picture. The girl stood near the field again, ready to begin work. However, she could not understand why her husband smiled so much, and why, despite all her refusals, he continues to smile so sincerely, as if he is ready to give her the whole world. This made it difficult for the heroine not to trust him and control her heartbeat. She remembered her brother's words, who said that as they spent more time with each other, her decisions about the future would become more accurate. Mabel realized that she still wouldn't be able to leave her husband in a year. She looked at the endless lavender field under the spring sun, thinking about it. Purple waves of flowers swayed in the wind, emitting a sweet aroma that was intoxicating and alluring. Butterflies fluttered over the field. They were painted sky blue and swirled in the air, dancing under the gentle rays of the sun. There was a feeling of magic. The artist had a canvas in his hands on which the first strokes had already been applied. He deftly wielded his brush, transferring the surrounding beauty onto the sheet. Next to him stood his muse, a girl with long hair. She was dressed in a light dress that fluttered in the wind like the petals of these flowers. Mabel watched with interest how intently the Duke worked on the drawing. She even wondered if he was really painting her portrait. But later, looking at his passion, I no longer doubted it. After all, he worked so enthusiastically that he didn't even notice anything around him. After a while, the Duke suggested taking a break so that Mabel would not get tired. The girl, although she felt well, happily accepted his offer. At that moment, she remembered the painting she had seen in his room. The guy thought his wife wouldn't notice her portrait in his room. Yes, he actually had the painting. But this image does not compare with reality. If it were not for the painting, he would not have been able to survive these 5 difficult years. Indeed, soon after the death of his father, the death of the girl was announced. At that moment, it was very difficult for the hero. After some time, Demore finished painting. Although the picture was not completely ready, the hero decided to finish painting it at home. And I showed the sketches to my wife in the hope that she would like it. But it was difficult for the girl to say anything from the sketches. When she leaned over to look at the picture, his hair touched the guy's face. This gave him mixed feelings. He was touched by the way his wife smelled and how her soft hair smelled. The girl said that there was something similar to her in the picture. The heroine decided to clarify whether he would continue to paint the picture with oil paints, but he didn't hear her. Their glances, like 2 rays of the sun, warmed each other. They contained love, care, and boundless tenderness. So they carried on a silent conversation, understandable only to the 2 of them. There were no words in it, but the look was filled with love, gratitude, and warmth. He was filled with pure, sincere happiness and spoke about love more eloquently than any words. At that moment, the heroes heard their son calling them. The girl ran to him and asked what dreams the child had. She hoped he was doing very well. The boy said that his mother had a very strange expression on her face. Mabel thought something was wrong with her, but that's not what the kid meant. He wanted to say that his mother looked very beautiful, but for some reason her cheeks turned red. The girl said it was because she was hot. Patrick began to joke, saying that his mother looked like a peach. After all, he didn't think the weather was hot. His father also approached the boy. The Duke decided to ask if he had gotten enough sleep. When the boy woke up, his hair was a little disheveled and looked funny. The kid began to tell him that he dreamed of pudding, and he wants another portion of this deliciousness. At that moment, the girl moved away from them so that her husband would not see her in such a state. She wanted to bring pudding from the carriage. Demore worried that this might be a burden on his wife, but she wanted to take a walk, because she stood for a very long time while the picture was being painted. The heroine said that she would return soon. She quickly walked to the carriage and took the pudding. However, too little time had passed, and she was afraid that her face was still red. So the girl decided to walk a little more. Very beautiful trees grew nearby. They provided excellent shade in which one could hide from the sun. The heroine enjoyed the clean air. It seemed that in the city he was not at all like that. Later, quite some time had passed since she had walked alone. Clouds began to appear in the sky. The girl realized that it would soon start to rain, and so it happened. At first, the drops fell rarely, as if someone was lazily knocking on the ground. Then the rain got heavier. The wind shook the branches of the trees. Large drops like pearls fell from them. Soon the rain turned to downpour and the ground underfoot became slush. Just one wrong step and the heroine stumbled. It seemed like she was about to fall into the mud from the rain and be all wet. In anticipation of this, the girl closed her eyes. Since nothing can be done, The girl decided that as it will be, so it will be. At that moment, someone picked her up. Opening her eyes, she saw her husband next to her. It was he who supported her and helped her in a difficult moment. And then it turned out to be just in time. The girl asked the guy how he found her. He replied that it had started to rain, but his wife was still not there. Therefore, it was necessary to go on a search. The Duke asked if everything was all right with him. Mabel said she was fine, but it seemed her son's pudding had fallen. She was also soaked through. Noticing this, the hero gave her outerwear. He was worried that she would catch a cold. Patrick was waiting for his parents in the carriage. It was time to return home. The girl again and again saw in her husband's behavior a sincere attitude towards her. This surprised her. Even now the guy picked it up. The guy also carried an umbrella behind her and took care of her outerwear. It seems he really loved her. When the heroes arrived home, Mabel did not go to dinner, and immediately went to bed. She was worried that after the rain she might get sick. In the dream, she heard someone calling her. Waking up, the heroine saw her husband near the bed. He came here because he heard that she was not well. His son told him about this, but the girl said that she was fine. Children always react sharply to certain things, so their son exaggerated. The Duke touched Mabel's forehead with his hand. She actually had a fever. Her husband's hand seemed very cold to the girl. The heroine said that she had a fever not so long ago. Demore said he would call the doctor. The blonde was against it. She believed that the symptoms would soon go away. Her mother was like that too. And as a child I immediately called a doctor, even if the children were not so bad. The Duke understood that his wife did not like being treated. But now was not the time for resistance. After all, Mabel was counted on in the royal palace, and Patrick was worried about his mother. The husband asked the girl to think carefully. He suggested asking the doctor to prescribe less bitter medicine. The blonde agreed to this, and outside the window it was still raining. It seemed to Demore that his wife was tired from the heavy workload at work. She needed to eat on time and get enough sleep. Only then could she get better. The Duke then decided not to leave the room, sitting down next to her bed. The girl thought that after this he could return to his chambers. That's why it was strange to her why he didn't leave. But the brunette replied that he would sit near the bed, because he was supposed to be near his wife. Mabel felt that since they had servants, he shouldn't have done this. Besides, the heroine already wanted to sleep. But the guy said that he was not going to interfere with her in this. But he just wants to stay close to his beloved. And if he had come earlier, there would have been no such consequences. The hero did not want his wife to blame herself. But he didn't intend to leave either. He understood that the girl's condition could worsen while she slept. But she replied that the Duke probably had a lot to do. And he hardly has time to babysit her. The guy asked not to worry about it. Besides, his son is now with a nanny. His father asked him not to go into his mother's room so that he would not get infected. Now the girl needed to stop worrying and fall asleep. All I had to focus on was recovery and sleep. The heroine slowly lowered her eyelashes. Then her eyelids gradually closed. She felt her body relax and her thoughts slowly fade away. Soon she was completely immersed in the realm of sleep. And when I closed my eyes, I only heard the crackling of wood in the fireplace and my own cough. Just like that winter when I was sick last time. Just the thought warmed my soul. Now the room was much warmer and the blanket was much softer. As soon as she opened her eyes, she saw someone sitting next to her. Because of this, the heroine became much calmer. Despite the man sitting next to her, the girl was lost in her thoughts. And it seems, she heard someone wishing her good night. Then she heard someone calling her. It was Patrick. For some reason, her son was screaming and calling for her help. He cried a lot. But the girl could not help him because she could not move. Then the heroine heard a voice that said that it had already warned her about this. This wouldn't have happened if she had stayed in the shadows. The kindness of an unknown person should not be neglected. After all, now he is in a difficult position. If Mabel resists, it will only hurt more. She knew this would happen. And a moment later I saw in front of me my husband's son and the wall that separated them. The girl felt that death was very close, but I didn't want to die. A loud scream filled the entire room, and the Duchess woke up. The husband sitting next to her approached her. He said it was just a bad dream and asked if his wife was okay. The girl was sweating because she had a nightmare. Realizing that this was not reality, she said that she was fine. At that time it was already about 4 o'clock in the morning. The heroine was surprised that her husband was next to her all this time, but she couldn't understand why. The guy replied that compared to his interlocutor, he was not sick. and he offered to bring water. This behavior turned out to be very strange for Mabel. She wondered over and over again why all this was being done. After all, this must be wrong. But the Duke did not understand what she was talking about. He never found an answer to what exactly he was doing wrong. The girl again asked her husband why he needed all this, and why is so much kindness directed towards her. She was also worried that the guy didn't want to become the queen's husband. After all, this seems very strange. But the hero repeated the same thing over and over again. There is only one girl for him, and that is Mabel. She has always been and will be the only one. He never wanted to become the queen's consort. Therefore, there is no need to continue asking these kinds of questions. The guy was offended that his beloved considered him a deceiver. He did not understand what prompted her to such a conclusion. But the hero did not force his wife to explain his behavior. Demore decided to find out what to do to convince his beloved of this. The girl said the phrase, "your diary." Suddenly she realized that she had said it out loud. The Duke asked if his wife was referring to the diary he had kept earlier. And I realized who took it. The blonde's eyes filled with fear. The brunette explained that the diary was on the other side of the shelf. And he was also very surprised when he realized that someone had touched his books. Before this, the guy ordered the servants not to touch them. The girl realized that they had figured it out. It seemed that now she would be punished for her action, or even that she would be beaten for it. But the guy asked in a warm voice if she wanted to look at him. He actually kept a diary. But when I wrote in it, I was a little out of my mind. If your beloved so wants, she can look at this diary, and perhaps she will feel calmer. You can read it as much as you like. But Mabel had the idea that if her husband was so easily ready to give her his diary, then most likely there were no clues in it, or he is going to show a fake. Therefore, the heroine said that there was no need for this, and now she wants to sleep, because her head still hurts. She asked her husband to return to his chambers, but he replied that he would stay next to her. The girl said that the Duke can do as he wants, but then let him not blame her for being tired. However, the husband did not intend to do this. The guy once again wished his wife good night. Morning has come. The sun's rays made their way through the curtains, filling the room with warm light. Birds sang outside the window, chirping about something of their own. Mabel woke up feeling rested and full of energy. This time she managed to sleep without nightmares. It was real happiness. At that moment, someone pulled the blanket over themselves. Turning around, the heroine saw her husband nearby. He slept right next to her bed, so he must be tired. And this despite the fact that his wife asked him to return to his room. Sometimes he was very stubborn. The girl looked at the guy with warmth. His hair was a little disheveled, but the moment she wanted to touch them, the Duke woke up, and he saw that his wife was no longer sleeping either. The Duke decided to ask if his wife was feeling better. It seemed that such a question was asked immediately after waking up, and so it was, because nothing was more important to him than the girl and her health. Mabel said she feels much better now, and thanked her for taking care of her. The hero said everything is fine. After all, a husband's duty is to take care of his sick wife. However, he is very happy about the improvement in her condition. And you can express your gratitude to the guy by drinking the medicine prescribed by the doctor. Even though she was feeling better, there was no point in avoiding the medication. The girl promised to do so. Someone knocked on the room. Patrick came in right after that. Mabel asked why her son got up so early. He said that he hardly slept all night because he was worried about his mother. The child asked how she was feeling. The heroine was very pleased that her son was so worried about her, and she told the boy that she was already much better. The kid was very happy about this, and hugging his mother, he said that she was his most beloved person in the whole world, and he asked her not to get sick anymore. The father standing nearby asked his son how he felt about him. The child said that he also loves his father, but he loves his mother more. The Duke was surprised by Patrick's honesty, but it was clear that he was a little greedy in showing love. The father suggested that his son go for breakfast, since it was already the right time for this. But the boy wanted to go with his mother. However, she still needed to wash her face. The girl couldn't help but think that something didn't add up in her reasoning. It is strange that the Duke did not have any thoughts of becoming the Queen's husband. She also tried to find an answer to who hired whom. During these thoughts, a maid came into the room to clean up. Mabel asked her to call Lawrence, to ask him something. The heroine wanted to reveal the truth about what happened in the past. The heroine decided to understand what happened in the past. 5 years ago, the girl immediately believed that her fiancé ordered her murder. But now, looking at his recent behavior, the girl could not believe that he had done this. And if this is a game, then its plans are unknown. If it's not a game, then it's clearly missing something. All I could do now was find a diary from 5 years ago. The Duke said that he never intended to become king. We must then understand why the servants were discussing this that day. Mabel just needed to find out everything for herself. The girl came up with something and asked Lawrence for the ledger. This book records fees for managing the mansion and information about employees, including those who have left. This book, of course, was in the mansion. But Lorenz decided to find out why the girl was looking for her. She had not been interested in such questions before. But Mabel replied that now, as the real mistress of the mansion, she must delve into this work. Although in her heart the girl understood that it was unpleasant for her to deceive, in the servant's eyes, this was a rather unexpected and strange request. But he agreed to fulfill it. He said that he would bring this book soon. The girl was very happy about this. In her room, she was waiting for Lorenz. When the book was brought, the heroine began to study it. After some time, she managed to find something similar to what she was looking for. A total of 5 girls left after her disappearance, but she didn't know where they could be now, and besides, she only needed one of them. All that was left was to figure out how to find them. Since Mabel didn't know who was involved, she couldn't question anyone in the mansion. However, the thought came that I could find out about this from my brother, but even he will need to explain it somehow. A page of vacation reports caught the girl's eye. One of the maids had a vacation period right before the time of the incident. It seemed that this was exactly what was needed to solve the problem. The maid indicated in the report that she would go to the Kamatel Empire to take care of a relative, but then it would have nothing to do with her affairs. However, this maid is still working for them. This was something to think about. As soon as the girl began to read the name of this maid, someone entered the room. Their maid came to remind the heroine about work. After all, if Mabel doesn't start getting ready, she'll be late. It is incredible that the girl forgot about her work in the royal palace. After all, her thoughts were immersed in searching for answers to questions about the past. Arriving at the palace, the queen greeted the blonde with a reproach for being late. The girl apologized for her behavior. Of all the things, she forgot about the trip to the palace. This was unusual behavior for her. But the ruler said that it was not scary. After all, she thought that the heroine would not come today at all because she was feeling unwell. It was clear that the Empress was worried about her. Apparently, she's not such a bad person. Beauty asked Mabel if the Duke of Quinterel cared about her, but the girl denied it. The queen found this behavior strange. It seemed that she was considered stupid. Last time the Duke boasted about his wife to the Empress, so she wondered how good he was in married life. And since he occupies such a position, he had to take care of his wife on his own. Mabel looked at the ruler in bewilderment. The girl understood that something was wrong here. The heroine felt like she was being tortured. Although I expected it to be difficult, it turned out to be even worse. It seemed to her that the queen wanted her to collapse from stress. Luckily, it was time for the meeting. Therefore, the conversation had to end and go. A little later, the beauty asked the girl not to follow her. The ruler wanted to take another partner with her, and she ordered Mabel to stay in the central palace and prepare for the ball. Great hopes were placed on her, and the Empress was sure that the heroine would succeed. Her other assistants also entered the queen's office. They heard the ruler's request regarding the blonde. These girls realized that the ruler was jealous of her. After all, if the heroine went with her now, then along the way they would meet the Duke in the conference room. The assistants realized that this was what was bothering the queen. But Mabel couldn't even imagine this. She preferred to think positively. The girl decided to take care of the upcoming ball. Therefore, it was better for them not to collide with each other now. The blonde went to the library. Unexpectedly, the Duke himself came there. The heroine was surprised because she did not expect to see him here. She asked her husband why he came here. He replied that he was looking for his wife and knew where to look for her. The girl asked the guy what he would do if Her Majesty saw them. It was unexpected that this was the problem for her and not meeting her husband. Mabel said she's busy right now. Therefore, if the hero came here unnecessarily, then it is better for him to return. But he said he came for a reason. You need to check your wife's health. The guy was worried if she was having a good time and if she was okay. Although his beloved was not very seriously ill, the cold was still the cause of all major diseases. The girl understood that this was true, but repeated that she was fine. Suddenly, hearing a familiar voice, she asked her husband to hide. The queen entered the hall discussing tax issues with someone. The Duke could not understand why they should hide, but Mabel asked him to be quiet. She also covered his mouth with her hand. The heroine was very afraid that the queen would notice them, and then she might get into trouble because the ruler is in a bad mood. The queen seemed to be standing very close to them, and Mabel was so close to the duke. The girl looked at her husband with tenderness and affection, frowning slightly. There is a pleading look in her eyes, hinting that further words could harm their relationship. She gently touches her husband's hand and shoulder, and so trying to calm his ardor and calm him down. They were waiting for it all to end and for the queen to leave her office. The heroine asked her husband not to make a sound. The girl was afraid to be noticed, and he held her hand tightly in his. His fingers gently slid over her soft skin. The blonde froze, feeling the warmth emanating from him. The faint aroma of his perfume hung in the air, exciting her senses. His eyes, full of love and passion, were fixed only on her. A fire burned in their depths, bewitching and alluring. Mabel couldn't take her eyes off his face, feeling her heart beating faster and harder. Leaning forward, the guy touched her wrist with his lips. His kiss was gentle, but at the same time full of ardor. He kissed every inch of her arm. The girl felt a wave of warmth spread through her body. Her heart was beating so hard that it seemed like it was about to jump out of her chest. She couldn't help the trembling that took over her entire body. In the duke's kiss, one could feel all his love, all his tenderness. It was as if he was telling her without words everything that he could not express in words. The blonde felt loved, desired, and unique, and her heart felt like it was about to stop. The heavy oak door creaked open and the queen walked out of the library. The air, previously filled with oppressive silence, seemed to come to life. The heroes, languishing in anticipation, followed the queen's every step with bated breath. Not daring to move, they looked at each other furtively. A mixture of fear and hope flashed in their gazes. The guy began to think about what his wife might be upset about. He wondered if his wife was expecting this or wanted him to kiss her. But you can simply ask for this. The girl became embarrassed and said that this was not so. She supposedly didn't want this. However, she didn't turn away the kiss either. Although there was such a possibility, Mabel said she just put up with him, afraid of being heard. It was cramped behind the shelf and it was hard to turn your head. She slowly removed her hand from his, trying not to look at her husband. However, her look said otherwise. But she felt awkward looking into his eyes. That's why the girl said she was already leaving. The guy suggested not to rush, since they could enter the office again. In this case, the heroine suggested that the duke be left alone. That way no one would suspect anything. She looked at him again, tenderness flashed in her eyes. And turning around, Mabel left the room. As a farewell, the hero left his beloved a box of sweets. They were full of beneficial substances for the body. When a girl feels bad, she can eat this candy. Everyone enjoys receiving gifts. It was pleasant for the blonde, too. But still, she did not know the truth about who tried to kill her. So I joked and asked about the poison in the candy. The guy was very upset by this joke. After all, the gift was made from the heart. The girl apologized and ate one candy in front of him. It really was delicious. The hero gave her all the candies. Therefore, there was no longer any reason for them to stay here. Demure gently touched his beloved and kissed her. The girl, with a subtle smile on her face, left the library. When she left, she quietly closed the door behind her. There was silence in the corridor, and only the echo of her steps, filled with lightness, could be heard. The girl leaned against the wall, closing her eyes and remembering her husband's tender words, his care and affection. A feeling of calm and tranquility spread in my chest. The conversation with my husband was full of love and support. Lightness reigned in the heroine's soul, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She felt happy and loved. In the evening, the city plunged into twilight. Tired but happy, the heroine was returning home after a long day of work. There was twilight inside the house. Several rays of the setting sun made their way through the curtains, creating bizarre patterns on the floor. Walking along the castle corridor, the girl met her son's nanny. This is very timely, since it was possible to immediately find out about the child. And meeting Janet, the blonde asked how Patrick was doing. She seemed so busy preparing for the ball that she didn't pay attention to the baby. She replied that the boy was doing great and sleeping well. Yesterday, as soon as he had free time, he worried about his mother. And for the girl herself, the Duke ordered the nanny to prepare medicine. Mabel had a request for Janet, but she asked not to tell anyone about it. The heroine wanted to find several people, but more on that later. Entering the room, Mabel decided to rest. The work never ended. The blonde would never have thought that there would be so many reasons to worry at one ball. She really missed her son at that moment. After all, the girl had been so busy lately that she didn't even have time to see his face. Therefore, I decided to visit my son and go down to his room. But as soon as she left her room, she saw the nanny and the boy in the corridor. Having met his mother, he joyfully ran towards her. The child said that he had read the book before and suggested reading it with his mother. However, the time was already late. Therefore, the girl suggested not reading but singing him a lullaby. The young mother told the nanny that she would put her son to bed today herself, and Jeanette can be free. The heroine said goodbye and the nanny left. There was silence in the night room. The soft light of the moon came through the window, illuminating the sleeping boy. Mabel sat down on the bed and gently stroked his hair. At that moment, she forgot about all her worries and worries. After all, next to my son, I felt calm and happy. The blonde told her son that he must cover himself with a blanket. However, the child was hot. Because of the rain, it suddenly became colder, and the boy could catch a cold in the morning. And if he gets sick, he won't be able to play with his mother. These words made the child obey. The girl carefully covered him with a blanket and kissed his forehead. Later, the baby asked his mother to go on a picnic again, just so that no one gets sick after it. The child liked the picnic last time because it was fun then. There was a lot of delicious food and everyone saw lavender. He also remembered the pleasant smell of these flowers. Therefore, the baby again wanted to go on a picnic with mom and dad. The girl asked her son if he liked his father. He replied that he liked it very much. But my mother had asked this question before. The boy wanted to know why he was asked about this so often. The girl understood everything. She realized that her husband really found a common language with their son, and they became friends. Therefore, the heroine suggested asking Dad about a new picnic. The kid was incredibly happy to hear this. He even seemed to glow with happiness while lying on the bed, or is about to jump on it now. But the hour was already late, so it was time for the child to sleep. There was silence in the room, broken only by the quiet snoring of the sleeping boy. The mother lay nearby, tenderly hugging her son. The soft light of the moon shone through the cracks of the curtains, creating intricate patterns on the floor. In this dim lighting, the faces of the sleeping people seemed especially serene and peaceful. The heroine, falling into sleep, saw wonderful visions. Suddenly, she woke up from a strange sensation. The son slept peacefully, but there was a special silence in the room. The mother's heart sank with anxiety. Rising from the bed, the barefoot girl stepped on the cold floor. The room was in twilight. Only moonlight illuminated individual objects. The heroine realized that she could not keep her husband and son apart any longer. So I went to Damer's room to talk. The girl's heart was pounding in her chest like a bird in a cage. Her hands trembled slightly as she approached the door of her husband's room. She was worried, but it was not ordinary worry. She had to barely hold her breath, feeling cold shivers running down her spine. Mabel approached the door of her husband's room, and it was too late to retreat. Every step was difficult for her. It seemed that everyone around could hear her heartbeat. The girl looked around furtively, making sure that no one saw her excitement. And finally, she stopped in front of the door. Sighing, she raised her hand and knocked. The Duke opened the door. At that very moment, his heart began to beat faster in surprise. He wanted to say something, but the words got stuck in his throat. The guy couldn't believe his eyes. It seemed to him that it was a ghost standing in front of him. Having collected his thoughts, the hero invited his wife to enter. Since it was already late, his wife should have gone to bed. And since she came to him, she probably wanted to talk about something. Mabel wanted to see Patrick, but the guy was surprised why she came to his room and not to his son. The Duke invited his wife to come into his room rather than stand on the threshold. His hand, like a strong and reliable protection, clasped her palm. The warmth of the touch warmed the blonde, giving her strength for future steps. Damour's fingers, gently squeezing the girl's hand, spoke without words about love and care. At that moment, she felt safe. Stepping beyond the threshold of the room, her heart was pounding in her chest. Uncertainty constrained her movements, and doubts tormented her soul. But there was no turning back. The girl was surprised that she still decided to go into the Duke's room and alone. The hero offered his beloved tea, but she refused. The guy decided to listen to the blonde. He wondered what she was thinking about, that she couldn't sleep, and came to him. Mabel said that Patrick wants to go on a picnic again. The Duke said that the boy must definitely agree, but it wasn't worth worrying so much about that you couldn't sleep at night. The girl said that she recently noticed her son likes her less than her husband. And then the guy realized that his wife would be with him for more than a year. There is no need to worry about this. No matter what Mabel said further, he understood everything for himself. The heroine saw her portrait on the table, right next to the bed. The girl took it in her hands and began to examine it carefully. In the painting, she was depicted in the dress in which she first came to this mansion. But the guy said that there were other portraits of her in the room. He also almost finished painting a picture of a lavender field. All that remained was to add the finishing touches. The heroine asked when her husband was going to finish the picture. He replied that most likely it would be closer to the start time of the score, because the painting needs time to dry. However, no matter how ideally he tried to portray the girl, he still could not keep up with the real thing. Mabel thanked her husband for these words. She saw that he always remained sincerely with her. This gave her confidence in her husband. Daymore continued, saying that he was able to survive the last 5 years only thanks to such portraits. Looking at these imperfect images, he tried to return the ideal one. And finally, she was already here. They stood side by side, their gazes seemingly intertwined in a silent tango. Words were unnecessary, because all their feelings were expressed in the depths of their eyes. In each other's reflection, they saw heroine all their lives, all the joys and sorrows, all the dreams and hopes. At that moment, they were united, like two halves of one whole. And they couldn't take their eyes off each other. The couple stood as if spellbound by the magnetism of their love. The fire of passion burned in their gazes. The girl looked at the guy and said that he spoke as if he had been waiting for her for a very long time. And so it was. Every day of waiting was like hell. He thought he was going to die, but he couldn't. After all, he hoped that Mabel was still alive. The world meant nothing without her. The guy took his wife's hand and kissed it, and then he began to kiss her lips. Closing her eyes, she enjoyed this moment. It was an indescribable feeling of pleasure that the heroine had not previously allowed herself to experience. The next day, the Duke, as always, went to the royal palace. And in the evening, Lawrence greeted him in the corridor. The servant noted that the hero came late today, but he replied that he had a lot of work. The guy asked where his wife and child were. Lawrence replied that the young master was sleeping, and the Duchess is in her room having refused dinner. It looked a little strange, so the brunette went to visit his wife in her room. He knocked on the door, but she did not answer and did not come out to him. The guy said that he heard from the servants about his beloved's refusal regarding dinner, and the fact that all day she asked the servants to leave her alone. The hero wanted to find out what happened to his wife. However, the girl still did not answer. The Duke began to doubt that Mabel was inside. Or maybe she's there, but she's gotten sick. Entering the room, Daymore saw that the girl was not on the bed. It even seemed to him for a while that she was not in the room. But turning to the window, he saw that the heroine was crying alone. The guy said her name in a gentle voice. The girl behaved very strangely and unusually. It was as if she had been replaced. The husband decided to ask what was going on, but she replied that she wanted to think about something. The Duke started asking again what she was upset about, and if it had anything to do with Patrick. The girl denied this. Then the guy thought that he was the reason. However, after these words, the blonde began to apologize. Over and over again, she said the word, sorry. Daymore suggested that she not tell the reason for the upset if she didn't want to. But he also asked her not to cry. The hero tried to reassure her that she had not done anything wrong that warranted an apology. You just need to move on and stay on his side. And he didn't ask her for anything else. His arms were so warm as the Duke hugged her, trying to calm her down. And the girl said that she wanted to stay in them forever. The guy couldn't believe what he was hearing now. It was more like a nightmare, but not like reality. He pressed Masha closer to him and said that he loved her. The husband wanted his wife to feel better, but she didn't need anything except his hugs. After this, the Duke said that he could leave if the girl wanted to be alone, but the heroine continued to hold his hand. And she did what she had not allowed herself to do before. A minute later, she decided to look him in the eyes and asked him to stay with her tonight. The guy was afraid that he would wake up and realize that it was a dream. After all, he really wanted this to happen in reality. The hero couldn't believe that his wife was really asking him to stay, and he asked if she was sure of her request. But the blonde replied that she didn't want to be alone today, and really hoped that someone would be with her all night tonight. The Duke said that he would definitely stay with her, but first he needed to change clothes. Arriving in his room, he could not come to his senses for a long time. And looking at his reflection in the mirror, he tried to understand whether it was reality or not. Mabel had never said before that she wanted her husband in her room at night. It's not that she wasn't so friendly before, but today there has been a drastic change, and the hero was very glad that now his wife could trust him. However, he was worried that something might have happened to her family, but in that case there would be no need for her to apologize. Therefore, everything is probably fine with Marquis and Patrick. The guy wondered whether it was worth asking his wife about her decision or not. After all, she might cry again, and he didn't want to spoil her mood. Entering Mabel's chambers, the brunette saw that his wife had already fallen asleep on the bed. It was extraordinarily beautiful and sweet. It seemed like he had never seen her like this before. Demore stood and admired his beloved wife. She must be very tired. This is quite likely considering how many tears were shed. The brunette really hoped that she wasn't crying because of him. After all, he didn't want the girl to have reasons to cry at all. The guy wanted her to always smile, so beautiful and warm, just like when they first met. And if she cried, then it would be better to do it next to him. After all, then he will be able to wipe away her tears and hug her. The hero leaned over his beloved to kiss her forehead, and he wished that her dreams would be beautiful, like herself. The spring morning has arrived. Sunlight filled the room with warmth and comfort. Mabel woke up in a great mood, as if nothing had happened yesterday. However, she had difficulty opening her eyes. The girl believed that she fell asleep yesterday when she was crying, and his lordship did not wait for her. But then she remembered that she had asked him to stay in the room with her for the night. It was a truly crazy thing to do. The heroine couldn't believe she did something so embarrassing after her tears and apologies. And then she fell asleep first. The girl was afraid to imagine what her husband would think about her after this. However, when she looked in the other direction, she saw her husband lying next to her. Yes, he slept with her all night. This was very unusual for a girl. She tried to cover him with the blanket, but carefully so as not to wake him. The guy always looked very flawless, even when he was sleeping. What painful expressions were on his face in the past, she will never know. But now she wanted him to smile when he woke up. Otherwise the girl will cry again. Sleep began to recede from the Duke, and the girl realized that he was about to get up. The heroine thought that it was she who woke him up. After all, he woke up right after her. And she told her husband that she didn't think that he would sleep here. But the Duke replied that he had decided to fulfill his beloved's request. The girl said that she did not have nightmares thanks to the presence of her husband nearby. The blonde understood that she had been behaving strangely since yesterday, and her husband wanted to know the reason for this. She said that she just had a lot of thoughts in her head. Or is age taking its toll? The heroine also asked for some time to think. The Duchess promised to tell her when she was back to normal. The guy didn't mind, and he understood that changes were coming. It couldn't be helped, but he was still a little upset. Mabel apologized for possibly being the reason for his upset. He looked at her with a smile and said that she could make amends by going on a date with him. This was a very unexpected proposal. The girl didn't know how to react to this. After all, her last date was a very long time ago. But still I decided to agree. The heroine wanted her husband to smile not only when he woke up. She asked the Duke where they would go together. The guy decided to keep it a secret. The couple dressed beautifully and left the room together. Margot met them in the corridor. Anger gripped her when she realized that her brother spent the night in Mabel's room, and now they were going somewhere dressed up. Turning to the girl, the brunette said that she missed breakfast because she woke up late, and she wondered where the heroes were going without any snack. The Duke said they wanted to eat somewhere else. After all, they have a date today. Margot said that she would have lunch alone today. She looked at Mabel with a very cold gaze. The blonde was afraid to draw hasty conclusions, but she understood that what she saw was not an accident. The look Margot gave her was terribly cold. The girl realized that her husband's sister simply hated her. She tried to understand the reason for this. Perhaps the brunette thought that she was not worthy of being next to her brother. Or maybe there is another reason. But this look clearly belongs to a man who was ready to kill someone. Mabel realized that she was already close to solving the mystery that she was trying to find out. And now it was time for her to go on a date with her husband. The Duke suggested that his wife not worry about her son but simply relax. After all, everything will be all right. The heroes left home, inspired by each other. Margot stood and looked at them with a numb look. She couldn't believe that her brother's feelings had become mutual, but she could no longer somehow prevent it. The couple's date went just fine. They enjoyed a pleasant dinner and warm conversations with each other. The brunette understood that his wife was very beautiful, Suddenly, the topic of Margaret's marriage came up in conversation. The Duke had previously talked to his sister about this topic, but she said that she didn't want to do it yet. The girl decided to find out why her husband announced this so unexpectedly. The heroine didn't even think that her husband might feel uncomfortable next to Margot. After all, she often hurt her brother. The blonde thought that the Duke would begin to suspect something if she said one more word, but she didn't want her beloved to worry now. Therefore, it is better not to worry too much about this. Deciding to change the topic of conversation, the Duchess said that the place where they were dining was truly wonderful. And the food here is very tasty. After lunch, the heroes walked near the lake until the evening. The weather was wonderful that day. The night city shone with millions of lights, escorting them home after a long-awaited date. Footsteps along the familiar street echoed in the silence of the night. They seemed to echo the beating of their excited hearts. The cool wind ruffled their hair, but the couple tried not to pay attention to him, being immersed in their thoughts. Until recently, tension reigned between them, but now all the problems are behind them. Words of forgiveness were spoken, tears were cried, grievances were forgotten. Peace reigned in their souls and smiles shone on their faces. They walked hand in hand, feeling an inextricable connection that no trials could destroy. At home, cozy light. The warmth of the fireplace and the aroma of a delicious dinner awaited them. And most importantly, their common son. Having crossed the threshold, they plunged into an atmosphere of love and peace. All worries melted away without a trace, remaining outside the door. They hugged tightly, feeling each other's heartbeats. At that moment, the heroes knew that they had managed to preserve their love, and now a bright future awaited them. New plans for tomorrow, new dreams and new joint discoveries. But now they wanted only one thing, to enjoy the moment and spend this night together. Their hands gently intertwined, and their lips whispered words of love. A cozy bed and soft pillows awaited them in the bedroom. They fell onto the bed, hugging each other, and closed their eyes. At that moment, they felt truly happy. After all, they knew that many wonderful moments awaited them ahead, which they would share between the two of them. And they began to look forward to the coming of a new day.